Mrs. Starnes?
Here.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Damp?
Here.
Ms. Aguilera?
Here.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Blossman?
Here.
Mr. Armenter?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Mallett?
Here.
Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Morrow?
Here.
Mr. Temple?
Here.
Ms. Werner? Here. Mr. Williams? Mr. Woods? Mrs. Zuschlag?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, there's a quorum to begin.
Thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? That's right. I believe we have no one registered for public comment. Before we recess for committees, I'd like to share a few things with each of you. Previously, at a previous Board of Supervisors meeting, my fellow supervisors approved changes to the committee structure based upon my recommendations. Foremost, promoting research is my top goal. The board created a permanent committee dedicated to research and engagement called the Research and Agricultural Extension Committee. More than a century ago, LSU accepted the Morrill Act, a land grant, and along with it the obligation to teach the applied sciences of engineering and agriculture, as well as providing for military training. Later, the Hatch Act and the Smith-Lever Act provided funds for land-grant universities to conduct agricultural research and to disseminate that knowledge to the growers of our nation. This unique American higher education model couples the wonders of the classical education with applied knowledge and a duty to share that knowledge. Many of you have heard me speak of my grandfather. My family was directly helped by the work of the LSU Agricultural Extension Service and the work of this university. So this is a personally important matter to me. I take very seriously LSU's status as the land-grant university of the state of Louisiana and the unique area that it places us within the state of Louisiana. Our research function is also a unique feature of at LSU of higher education in Louisiana. We've all seen the statute, heard the stories of us being the flagship university. This is why. We are the research institution in Louisiana. We are the land-grant institution of Louisiana. It is our responsibility to teach the agricultural sciences, engineering sciences, and the military sciences in Louisiana. This is a sacred obligation we've undertaken for well over a century. This Research and Agricultural Extension Committee is tasked with considering, among other things, how broadband investments can be used as part of the extension model. In other words, how can LSU use broadband to extend the services of the university and of the state to our citizenry? Much like the rural electrification efforts of a previous era, I believe broadband can carry knowledge and access and shed a new kind of light. LSU has long and proud tradition of graduating military officers, also in fulfillment of Morrill Act requirements. Our nation now faces threats beyond traditional physical battlegrounds. The fights now occur in cyberspace, unseen by the public. No human losses yet. But I am supportive of a reinvigorated ROTC. I plan to advocate for an ROTC that trains the officers for today's battles and future battlegrounds. This committee will ensure that our moral obligations match the future needs of our armed services. I've asked Supervisor Werner to chair this committee. Not only does she and her family have a long, proud tradition in the agricultural arena, she's a past chair of the Board of Supervisors. Another significant change is the insertion of diversity and inclusion within the role of every committee. As we work to craft a better Louisiana, a better American society, it has to be innate in our thinking that we are inclusive and remove barriers to access wherever we find them. Our state's prosperity is improved when every member of society is able to participate. During my time as chair, I will have on every agenda at least one item related to improving the university's efforts in diversity and inclusion. This board has also agreed with my suggestion that a new standing committee be formed called the Title IX and Access Committee to address issues related to Title IX and the accessibility of the LSU experience to all students at all campuses. It's my goal of this committee to go beyond simple compliance orders, beyond fulfilling suggested requirements, which I consider to be a floor, not a ceiling, and push our thinking to how this university can be a model in our state and elsewhere for disability access and a model for higher education for Title IX accessibility, reporting, and compliance. I appreciate the support of my fellow supervisors. I look forward to new committees doing their great work along with the other committees and supervisors. So without objection, I would recess the board meeting and ask, before I recess the board meeting, I ask Ms. Lofton to come give us the invocation.
Can we all stand? Alrighty. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and I thank you for every like-minded individual who is here to fulfill a task for your kingdom. I pray that you bless us as we do not walk in step with the wicked, but we delight in your law. Please, thank you for giving us this day. In your name we pray. Amen.
Ms. Lofton, will you tell us about yourself?
I am Stephanie Lofton. I'm a junior majoring in biochemistry and minoring in chemistry. I currently do research under the supervision of Dr. Adam Melvin in the chemical engineering department. My current project is working on the co-culture device that Ms. Emmeline Miller created, and we culture 2 through 1, which are known as triple-negative breast cancer cells and adipose-derived stem cells, and how that relates to the metastasis of cancer in breast cancer patients.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Emmeline Miller, and like Stephanie mentioned, we work together under the supervision of Dr. Adam Melvin in the Kane Department of Chemical Engineering. We're in a unique position that we're able to do cancer research in the Department of Chemical Engineering, and Stephanie mentioned a little bit about that. We had the pleasure of speaking to President Tate and some members of your team. If you came by, I'm glad to see you again. But essentially, our work is looking at the interactions of cancer cells so we can identify future targets for treatments and further research. And all of this is done thanks to grants that we've received, both through the Board of Regents and then from the National Institutes of Health. And I'd also like to add that the device that Stephanie mentioned, we have earned a patent for, and are pursuing a company with that as well. So,
Outstanding. Thank you very much, ladies.
thank you very much.
So without objection, I will recess the board meeting. Ask Ms. Werner to call the Research and Agriculture Committee to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Werner,
Here.
Ms. Aronson, Ms. Aguilera,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Ms. Jones. Here. Mr. Temple.
Here.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Before we begin, I would like to thank the chairman for his vision and leadership in creating this committee. It's an idea he talked about for quite a while, and I'm honored to be asked to chair it. As he referred to, my family has a long history, 4 generations in farming and agriculture in this state. And as a political candidate a few years back for the Public Service Commission, I made the expansion of broadband and the access to broadband one of my key issues in my campaign, hoping to raise the conversation. So it's very important to me that we continue this on in LSU, be the leader that we are. Maybe we just went online, who knows? In this area, we have access to every parish in the state. We reach children as young as 5th grade, and we have lifelong learners who access our programs through our various ag extension and online learning programs. It's vital to the continuation of the growth and the education of our population that we make this a top priority. I've also, growing up in an Army town, spent a lot of time with our ROTC. I've been honored to get to know our cadre and our cadets here and been very involved over the past years, as have many members of the board. It is wonderful that we have a committee now that will continue to focus on the future of our ROTC program, which is one of the strongest traditions, the oldest tradition that makes up LSU. We have a lot to cover in this committee, and today we're going to start with what I kind of call a narrow focus. We're going to hear from one of our research arms, but we could stay here for days and days and never even touch the surface of everything that happens at Pennington Biomedical Research. We will then move on to other campuses and other research arms, and I was so proud to hear the young women talk today about what is going on here at the A&M campus and how research happens at LSU from the days a student starts here. You don't have to be a PhD candidate to be involved in research. Our research is what sets us apart. It is what affects our rankings. It is what sets us apart in the state of Louisiana as the flagship university. We are expected to lead. We do lead. We lead in the SEC. We are uniquely positioned to change the lives not only of Louisianians, but of people across this country and across the globe with the various kinds of research that we participate in, and we hope to continue to gain the opportunities to help those around us to better life, better nutrition, better medical care, advances in farming, advances in communication, advances in engineering, all the things, I'm leaving out many, many, that our students, our professors, and our researchers are involved in. It's no doubt that over the last 2 years, nearly 2 years, it was LSU, from the vet school to the medical schools and back into our basic sciences, that were leading the development of the vaccines and the testing protocols that helped us finally reach the cusp of this horrific virus that has held us all hostage across the globe. I'm very proud that LSU has led through all of that. We don't always get the credit for it, so we are here to toot our own horn. So today, I'm very pleased to introduce and let him be our first presenter, Dr. John Kerwin of Pennington Biomedical Research.
Thank you, everybody. Let me go straight into this because I wanted to ensure that we have enough time to cover everything. Pennington Biomedical, as you know, is a leader in the biomedical research field. We were established as a nutrition research center back in the 1980s. And it is my pleasure today to present to you the background on what Pennington is and does. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the chairman, Chairman Stearns, for establishing this committee. It's an historic, actually, movement within the institution to recognize the importance of research. And as Chairwoman Werner referred to, this is the factor that distinguishes us from other institutions across the state and across the country. Pennington has been a leader in the biomedical research field for the past 30 years. We focus on solutions from cells to society, as our title implies here. Our vision is to lead the world in eliminating chronic disease, and our mission is to discover the triggers of chronic diseases through innovative research that improves human health across lifespan. We work from 5 different cores, essentially. We have basic research, discovery research, the kind of research that was just alluded to by the students who gave the invocation. We have clinical research, clinical trials on new drugs, the kind of work that we do with Moderna, for example, and Pfizer drugs, testing the efficacy and safety of those drugs. We do population science studies to go into the communities and evaluate how different interventions can impact health in those communities. We are structured around scientific cores, which is quite unique, and these cores have state-of-the-art research. And for those of you who have visited Pennington, you saw some of those cores in the past, and those are really what separates Pennington from our competitors around the country. And we have an education enrichment program, and you'll hear today from our Associate Executive Director for Education, Dr. Leon Redman. Our mission is realized in unique settings. These include integrated, interdisciplinary, and innovative approaches to research. We have approximately 500 employees in 41 research labs and occupy about 763,000 square feet of research space. We are known as a research leader. We have collaborations in 24 different countries with 200 and odd worldwide collaborators. One of the great statistics for Pennington is that we have been able to provide to the people of Louisiana unique clinical trials, and we have had 54,850 participants in these clinical trials over the years. The metric for productivity from a research center, from an academic institution, are publications, and we have published over 6,826 peer-reviewed papers in the literature today. Now, it's one thing to publish papers, but does anybody read them, and does anybody cite them? And the citations are reflected in the next number, 321,000 scientific literature citations. This is an important number because this is one of the key metrics that feed into reputation of an institution, and it is a metric that's used in accounting for the rankings for LSU. We are a collaborative institution. We have collaborative efforts and partnerships with multiple institutions across the state, but most importantly with LSU A&M and LSU Ag Center, where we have joint academic appointments. We have research in functional foods. We have clinical trials and graduate and undergraduate training, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Dr. Redman. We also have joint program in diabetes and botanical with LSU Health New Orleans, and we have a number of centers which I will come back to again, the botanical research and the nutrition research centers. We also have partnership with LSU Health Shreveport, where we're working on various grants and pilot projects and multi-institutional projects, and most recently our LCAT submission. We partner with multiple institutions outside of LSU. Pretty much all of the academic institutions that are conducting any kind of biomedical research in the state, including outside of the academic institutions in the Department of Education and the Department of Health. One of the landmark programs in biomedical research in Louisiana is this Louisiana Clinical and Translational Science Center. It's abbreviated LCATS, and I have the privilege of leading that. It is an onerous task in many respects because LCATS actually really does reflect what goes on in this center. It is like literally herding cats from institutions across the state. Here in Baton Rouge, we have Pennington, of course, and LSU A&M. In Shreveport, we have LSU Health. And in New Orleans, we have multiple institutions, from LSU Health to Tulane, to Xavier, Children's Hospital, the Dental School, Ochsner, UMC, and the VA. So all of these folks have come together to represent the growth of clinical and translational science in the state. It is a great example of what institutions can do together. The success of this program has been noted at federal level. We rank in the top 3 centers of this kind in the country. We have been funded for 2 cycles, at $40 million, and we just submitted our 3rd funding cycle, which is another $20 million. We have, as I alluded to, 11 major academic research and healthcare institutions. We work on building research infrastructure, not the sexiest of terms, but that is the core of what makes things work for research. And we have been able to develop over the last 9 years now a very effective and efficient system that has led to us being able to bring into the state multiple research grants and publish research findings. LaCATS was particularly effective during COVID, and you'll see from this slide, we have been involved in community testing and vaccination, and most recently in a major study that's coming out from federal sources called the RECOVER study. The RECOVER study is a $470 million initiative from NIH, and LaCATS represents Louisiana, and we have all the major institutions participating in that. We also have a COVID sequencing grant that is funded to examine the SARS-CoV-2 variants, and that is a grant that's actually operating out of LSU Health in New Orleans under Dr. Lucio Miele. In terms of future opportunities on the COVID front, we see that Pennington is central and fully aligned with all of the comorbidities that are related to COVID. You can all relate to this. You probably have known folks who have had either weight or diabetes issues who have had real challenges with COVID. NIH is likely to continue COVID research for the next foreseeable future, and so we are well positioned to be able to contribute to and secure funding for those initiatives. And we'll need to devote some new resources as we move forward in that area. In terms of the vision for the future of Pennington, we have a number of programs that are active, are growing. The Bariatric and Metabolic Surgery Initiative, which this board approved several years ago now, brought to Pennington a new mission in terms of patient care. And we were fortunate enough to be able to recruit one of the top surgeons in the country to lead that program. That is growing and will open in a new facility officially in the spring of '22. We have a botanical center that examines and tries to identify new compounds in botanicals. This is where most of the drugs that we use today actually come from, with the exception of the RNA vaccines, of course. We have a new cancer center, which I think will be integral and critical for the development of the NCI application. And we have a growing research portfolio in that area. We have 2 COBRE grants. These are important grants for idea states such as Louisiana, and they provide extensive research funding to be able to recruit faculty to our institutions and to build research infrastructure for new discoveries. We have a new diabetes center. Again, this is patient-focused and a part of the expansion of the mission of Pennington beyond the pure research element. We have a human performance component that works with DoD in particular, but also works with our athletes. We have an Institute for Dementia Research and Prevention, which is working on Alzheimer's and dementia, and of course the LaCATS Center, which I just alluded to. And then we have a Nutrition Obesity Research Center, which again is a federally funded program that's been running for a good 15 years now, and it is doing the cutting-edge research in nutrition. 6 months ago, we launched a national campaign around the obesity epidemic that we are seeing in the country. We label this Obesity USA, a fake city with a real problem. This is an awareness campaign. It's been running for 6 months. How do you measure the effectiveness of an awareness campaign? One metric that we're using is how many impressions has it gained. To date, this campaign, through out-of-home, through billboards, through radio and TV, has secured 1.2 billion impressions. That's essentially 1.2 billion seeds that have been sown around the awareness campaign and around Pennington, because part of this, the purpose of our campaign is to promote Pennington and LSU. So with that, I'm going to stop and hand off to Leanne Redmond. Leanne is the Associate Executive Director for Scientific Education and Director of the Reproductive Endocrinology and Women's Health Laboratory. And Leanne is going to talk to you a little bit about her research and the things that she has been doing, why she came to Louisiana in the first place, and the success and the contributions that she has been making to research here at Pennington, at LSU, and in the state. Leanne?
Welcome, Dr. Redmond. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. We're excited to hear about your presentation today.
Thank you, Chairperson Werner and Stans. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's actually not my first time in this room. I've been here a few times before to talk about some of our successes, but this is my first opportunity to really introduce myself, why I came here to Louisiana, LSU, Pennington Biomedical, and what I've been able to do in the short time that I have been here. So you can probably tell from my accent that I'm from the South, the deep South. I tell people I'm from across the bayou. For a long time, I used to tell people I was from Thibodaux, and they would actually believe me. But I was born and raised in Australia. I did all of my graduate education there. I actually graduated from the University of Adelaide, which was one of the 8 founding universities in Australia, from the medical school, but with a PhD in OBGYN and physiology. I'm an exercise physiologist by training because my love has always been sports and elite performance. So I started out working with female athletes. I was working with the Australian female rowing team, and I was trying to understand why their performance would be altered throughout the course of their menstruation and with different hormonal contraceptives. Really excited to continue to pursue that. I looked for opportunities to come to the US where I could continue that work. That led me to Ohio. I went to Ohio University, which is where Joe Burrow is from. I was there in Athens County, so everyone's familiar with that now. And I worked with a professor who was doing research sponsored by the Department of Defense. Similar to my work in athletes, she was working with the Female Army Rangers program. These women, of course, go through very rigorous training, and when they do so, they have disruptions to their menstrual cycle, which leads to infertility and other problems. So it was really fitting for my prior training to go there. But it wasn't until I moved to the US that I realized that I had a gift. And one of my gifts was for the love of health that I have, the love of nutrition, the love of a healthy lifestyle. And I really wanted to contribute and impart my knowledge on the things that I could see with my own eyes were problems in the US. And those were obesity, poverty, and being able to help people. So that led me here to LSU, Louisiana, Pennington Biomedical. I actually sought out Pennington because, believe it or not, some of my colleagues from Australia were already here. And I specifically came to work with Eric Ravison, who, as you know, is a Boyd professor here. And Eric was really exciting to me because he was conducting studies of calorie restriction, clinical trials, which were 2 things that I needed to learn, and obesity, the 3rd thing that I needed to learn. But I had the passion for women's health. When I quickly arrived at Pennington, I realized there was no program in women's health yet here in Baton Rouge, and there really needed to be. So Eric and I, we locked arms, and he helped me develop a plan to make women's health be part of the Pennington research portfolio. So I'll fast forward. We wrote a training grant for me that was in 2009, and I was successful in obtaining NIH funding at that time. And just 2 years later, in 2011, I wasn't even an assistant professor yet, I got a very large NIH grant. These are called R01 or UO1 level grants, and they provide $500,000 a year for 5 years to the successful awardees. The average age of people to get their first award is 42 years old. I was 31 years old at the time. So that's where we landed. So that was in 2011, and that's when I established what I call the Reproductive Endocrinology and Women's Health Lab. And so on a daily basis, what we do is we conduct research to understand the role of our environment today, right, which is an obesogenic environment. We've got high-fat foods, we've got sedentary lifestyle, on the health of women across the lifespan. I've put up there a number of different topics that our research intersects, but the majority of our work right at the moment is actually focused on obesity and pregnancy. This is a picture of all the different people in my lab at the moment. I have 14 full-time employees, and I also am proud to have 4 undergraduate student workers in the lab as well at the moment. So obesity is near and dear to the heart of most of the faculty at Pennington. And what you may not know is that obesity has very early origins. We inherit some risk to develop obesity from our parents, from their genes, but we also inherit some risk for obesity by what happens during our intrauterine development. So we know that obesity, one of the contributors to obesity is what happens in the womb. So there is this transmission of obesity from mothers to their babies. And so what I'm showing you, at the top, there are a number of different factors that we know can contribute to obesity risk in children. So we know that if a mother eats a high-fat diet, if a mother is not very physically active, if she lives in a poor situation, or she's succumbed to poverty or stress, these factors can contribute to poor outcomes in her baby. What's really important here is to remember that, 1 in 3 women of reproductive age in the US have obesity. They're going to pass on this vicious cycle to their baby. So if the mother has obesity, the child's more likely to be born at risk for obesity, and then of course as they develop throughout their lives, they're again more likely to pass that on to their children. So you can see how this becomes a very vicious cycle. So it's really important for Louisiana, LSU, and Pennington to be part of this obesity intergenerational transmission landscape. And it's important because we know in Louisiana, 1/3 of our children here suffer from obesity or overweight. And if you look at the statistics here, when a child is only between 2 and 4 years of age, this is before going to school, 13% of those children are already suffering from these problems. And you know that we often top the charts in a lot of things. Luckily, we're not top in this one, but we're still up there in the top 10 states in the country for childhood obesity. And you know what? Our parents, they care. Our parents care, our educators care. More than about 90% of parents think that this is a problem, and so should we, because look at the economic cost. The economic burden is real to the state. So you can see that the state's cost for childhood obesity has increased drastically over the past 2 decades and is now topping more than $127 million per year in Louisiana. So I'm proud to say that we're putting this on the map. And we know that pregnancy is a really important time for intervention. Not only is this when obesity is transmitted, but it's a window of opportunity for intervention. We call it a teachable moment. Pregnancy is a time when couples are more likely to make a change to their health than any other time in their life. Many women will take a prenatal vitamin. Many women will stop drinking, stop smoking, and do other things to improve their health. So we have a really captive audience. There are 2 time points around this that we think we can intervene. One is right before conception. Easier said than done, right? Because we know that 50% of babies are unplanned. But nevertheless, there are opportunities perhaps before conception, and Dr. Kerwin has some programs around that. But we think we can intervene in pregnancy. Think about prenatal care. Women present to prenatal care around 10 to 12 weeks of pregnancy, and they're going to be seen by their physician for the next 30 weeks until the baby's born, with a lot of visits to the doctor and so forth. So that creates about a 6-month window of time for us to improve their health and improve the outcomes for their baby. So I'm proud to say we are now fairly significant players in this sandbox, not only on a national scale, but also on an international scale. We now have pregnancy-related research in Louisiana. So my program is currently working on its 4th NIH-funded project, and you can see there that we've attracted more than $19 million of NIH funding to answer these important questions. We studied a cohort of women with obesity only throughout pregnancy. That had never been done before. We brought those women to Pennington. They spent the night in the metabolic chamber. They did MRI scans. They did all kinds of very sophisticated measurements. And our work, which is now in the dietary guidelines for Americans, showed that women with obesity need to not eat any more calories when they become pregnant in order to sustain the growth of a healthy baby in pregnancy. Our work has also led to the development of an app, and this is an app that can help women to gain a healthy amount of weight when they're pregnant. And we've adapted this app for women with low resources, and those are mothers that are in the Louisiana Women's Infants and Children's Program. And we have another really great project, and this is for women with morbid obesity only. So these are women who weigh about 250 plus pounds. And through this new program, we are actually trying whether weight maintenance is going to prove outcomes for the mother and for the baby. So these are just some examples of how we've put this on the map. Now, when you launch a new program like this, you can't do it alone. And I think staying true to the mission of LSU and the land-grant universities, we've had to establish strong partnerships. I've locked arms with the state and with the Louisiana Women, Infants and Children's Program to implement a trial to test out our app. I've established strong community partnerships with our 3 hospitals that are seeing pregnant women and delivering babies. And we have really strong ties with these groups because often I need to collect the placenta and I need to go and make measurements of the baby. So these aren't just like handshakes, these are real partnerships that have been strengthened over the last decade. We also have the privilege of all of the toys at Pennington. People that have joined me on a tour there have heard me describe it's like Toys R Us to a scientist that does clinical research. But I'm just showing you some pictures here of the different things that we can bring to the pregnancy research landscape just because I'm here. The picture right in the middle is actually a graduate student that worked with me from biological sciences, and she's working there on the placenta, but she went on to McGee, and guess what? Now she's back here in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge. She's the scientific director at Women's Hospital. We have a picture there of a baby with some little dots on it. We're measuring brown fat in babies. This is a really important depot of adipose tissue that we don't understand because we haven't been able to measure it. Our group pioneered this method using MRI, and with a postdoctoral fellow, we have new NIH funding, and we're about to start on that research. And on the right, that's the only operating metabolic chamber for babies in the world that we're testing and measuring metabolism in babies. We've also established some really novel pathways for commercialization. So the first thing I'm showing you is a computer program that we developed that you can enter in a mother's age when she becomes pregnant, her weight when she becomes pregnant, and her height, and it tells her the number of calories that she needs to eat in each trimester of her pregnancy in order to achieve the international recommendations for weight gain. This is available right now and can be licensed, say, by an EMR company such as Epic, and it could be made available to all patients. We use it in our programs every day. That's the app that I mentioned called Smart Mums. It was licensed to Canada. I've helped them make Smart Mums Canada, and it's being tested right now in a pan-Canadian trial, and it's in both English and French there. The program that I mentioned in the Louisiana WIC program is on the radar of the federal government because WIC is obviously a federally funded program. If we show it to be successful here in Louisiana, we can scale this up. Not only can it be available to all mothers and babies in WIC in Louisiana, but it can be available to all mothers and babies across the United States. And through our novel research in the placenta, we have a published US patent for measuring a hormone, FGF21, in pregnancy, which we know can tell us the likelihood of a baby being having fetal growth restriction and being born small for gestational age. And last but not least, wearing my educator hat now as the Director for Scientific Education. Really what all of these research programs and opportunities do, they provide opportunities. It's a pathway for giving, leading the next generation of scientists. So I have undergraduate students in my lab, I supervise students pursuing their honours thesis, I supervise master's students, and I've also had the privilege of supervising a PhD student, not to mention the postdoctoral fellows that come to Pennington to work with me in the same way that I came to Pennington to work with Dr. Ravison. So I really appreciate the opportunity actually to work here. I really like it a lot, if you can't tell. And next time you come to Pennington, I'll be willing to show you around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Redmond. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Redmond or Dr. Kerwin? I had the privilege of being present the day that we launched the WIC app, and the governor and the first lady hosted us that day for a very remarkable event. It was great to meet the women who were testing it out, who you'd brought into the program, as well as the researchers. This is something near and dear to Governor Edwards and First Lady Donna Edwards, the work that you've been doing, and it's certainly a hallmark of how we can help grow healthier citizens in this state.
Right.
We spent the morning hearing about, from the College of Human Sciences and Education. We start educating kids at 6 weeks old here at LSU, and so it is vitally important to the future of this state, the work that you are doing. We're so glad you found your way back to Baton Rouge and to Pennington. And
Thank you very much.
thank you for everything you do. Dr. Kerwin, thank you so much. You've helped us launch this committee. I want to thank my fellow committee members who've joined us in this effort, and we look forward to hearing from all our different research divisions over the next few months. So thank you so much. Is there any other business for the committee? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
Second.
It's been motioned and adjourned. Any objection? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We adjourn the committee.
Thank you, Supervisor Werner. Thank you for calling to order the very first Research and Agriculture Extension Committee. And I too look forward, thank the people from Pennington for this great presentation, and look forward to hearing from Ag Extension, from ROTC, and from other research people in our system in future meetings. Thank you. The next committee is another new committee that we formed, the Title IX Access Committee. I've asked Supervisor Jones to chair that committee. Supervisor Jones, would you call that committee to order?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Griffith, please call roll.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Woods?
Here.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Temple?
Here.
Ms. Werner? Here. Mr. Williams?
Here.
Mr. Zuschloff?
Here.
Madam Chair, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith. At this time, I ask that Dr. Cassidy come forward. She'll provide us with a presentation on the Title IX efforts.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Starnes and Ms. Jones, for providing me the opportunity to meet with you today. I would like to talk to you today about two things. The first will be an update on the Husch-Blackwell report and our progress on the recommendations, and a little hint of what life is going to be beyond the recommendations. And then second, I'd like to give you some data from the biannual report that's been required by the Board of Regents. So first, let me make sure So first, the 14 check marks that are on the screen right now represent 14 of the 18 recommendations of the Husch-Blackwell report that we have completed. I want to be a little bit careful here because some of those we truly have completed. For example, the reporting line has been changed, or we've moved from one facility to another. But there are others of those that are not going to ever be completed. They're going to be foundational and things that we're going to be doing going forward. So for example, the last one, which is rules apply to everyone, you never check that one off, right? So we have established some policies and protocols so that we feel like everybody has been communicated with that, and so we've checked it off, knowing that we're going to have to continue monitoring that and continue making that an important part of our office. In the past 7 months, as you kind of look through these, we've hired people, we've moved offices, we've revised policy, we've created websites, and we have done training and training and training and training and training of everybody. So we are deep in all of that and feel like we have a good handle on how we are going to keep that going forward. I also thought it would be important for you to know that the university has committed so far over $1 million of recurring funding for our office. That will increase this year as we continue to boost up our staffing. But I also thought I would tell you that athletics has put themselves in over $600,000 separate from the LSU money for their own programming, for the people that they have hired to make sure that they are in control of representing our policies from our office within athletics. So if there are 14 that have been completed, there are 4 that have not, and I want to take you through those and give you an idea of where they stand. The first one is the first recommendation, which says that Title IX office must be staffed appropriately. We have 2 more positions to complete in our office in order to check this one off. One is to hire a deputy Title IX coordinator. We have bringing 3 people to campus next week for that. We've been doing a search. We've got 3 people. They're coming to campus. So hopefully by the end of next week, we'll have identified the finalist for that, and within a few weeks after that, that person will start. So my projection for completing this part of it is just right after Thanksgiving. We also need to hire, in order to meet the requirement of the report, we need to hire 1 more investigator. We have first round interviews next week for that, so we're hoping to start at least 1 person by mid-December. I will tell you that once our office is up and running fully in both Title IX and civil rights, we will probably have between 6 and 8 investigators, because we're taking on not only the work of the Baton Rouge campus, but we're also doing the investigative work for all of the campuses. We will have highly trained investigators who know what they're doing with all of this, do it on a regular basis. Okay. One of the things that I did want to address, because I get asked this all the time, is why don't you just go out and why haven't you hired everybody? First of all, in order to hire a deputy Title IX coordinator, we had to hire a Title IX coordinator. That's easier said than done. Very fortunate that we hit the ball out of the park by hiring Josh Jones away from University of Kansas. He's here with me today. He's been here about 2 months and brought a wealth of experience with him. We needed to hire somebody away from another university who had a lot of experience, because we had a lot to work on and we are in the public eye. We couldn't hire somebody who was going to learn on the job. So we're very fortunate that he was here. The second recommendation is separated out to hire a deputy Title IX coordinator. I already mentioned that. We're going to have that completed in the next few weeks. The third one is recommendation 15, which is to thoughtfully consider presumptively appropriate sanctions. At this point, we have PM 73 that has been revised. That's the policy for our system that guides that. And we have got a range of sanctions that are listed in PM 73 that we're using successfully. We've researched how to do this on a more we want to develop a matrix, and so we have done our research now from other organizations to look at guidelines. We have a draft ourselves that we're doing. We just need to bring it around, and we're going to talk to students about it. We need to talk to faculty and staff and all of our Title IX affiliated groups to get any input from them, and we will have this implemented by the first of the year. The last one is to regularly measure climate and effectiveness. The way that this is going to be done per state law is that the Board of Regents is going to develop a survey, and our job is going to be to maximize student participation. So we will not be checking this off ourselves until the Board of Regents produces that that survey, and they are going to do that in the 2022 to 2023 academic year. So what I want you to get from this part of it is that by the end of this year, we will have checked off 17 of the 18 recommendations, the last one of which we will need to wait for the Board of Regents to do that. Moving forward so what happens when the recommendations are done? Our work just starts. The hard work begins at that point. We are going to follow up to the Husch-Blackwell report. Mr. Zuschlag, I don't know where you're sitting. I remember way back in March, I think was the first time I spoke to the board, you brought up the fact that we needed to have a 6-month audit afterwards. So we're at the 7-month mark, and audit has engaged Baker Tilly to do that. We're in the process right now of collecting all of our information and providing it to them. I think they're going to have a report for us by the end of December, and we are eagerly anticipating that. We think it's going to show the work that we've done, and we also think that we're going to find out some things that we still need to do, which is always a great place to be. Also, our work is going to now start to transition from operational to prevention. And not that we're not doing some things on prevention now, but we've been largely engaged in the operational aspect of it. So that is our, what's coming up. I want to move on now to the biannual report that we were required to put together on power-based violence. It's required both in Act 472 and in the Uniform Policy on Power-Based Violence put out by the Board of Regents. These first few slides that I'm going to show you are from the Baton Rouge data. All of the campuses pull together their information, but as might be expected because of the number of students and employees that we have, most of the activity here is on the Baton Rouge campus. So I'm going to present that data to you. This first table is the number of cases that were closed. Oh, let me back up for just a second. The date range for this report was June 29th through September 30th, so it's a small portion of the previous year. During that time period, the Baton Rouge campus had 63 reported incidents of power-based violence. This table shows you that 46 of those have been closed as of October 1st. 21 of those, the outreach was unsuccessful. So what happens when somebody files a complaint? The first thing that we do is that we reach out to the complainant and try to provide services to them. We try 3 times. If they don't respond back, then we close the case. So of the 63, 21 never responded to our overtures. 10 of them didn't want to file a formal complaint. That is what is required in order to move to an investigation. In 8 of those, the complainant or the respondent were unknown. We frequently get anonymous reports where people they just want to tell you what happened, but they won't give you any names. Hard to follow up in those regards. In 4 of the cases, there was no jurisdiction. That means it either happened off campus or it happened internationally, or the perpetrator was somebody who's not a member of the LSU campus community, and we have no jurisdiction over that. 1 person in the cases that were closed received a supportive measures only and decided that she was finished with us, so that was closed. And then there are 2 that were in the other category. I remember one of them was a student that we had to have an educational conversation with in order to resolve, and I don't remember off the top of my head what the second one was. But in any event, that's 46 cases that were closed out of the 63 that we reported. The next one shows you the open cases. These are ones that were open as of October 1st. 7 of those were complainants that wanted only supportive measures. They didn't want to follow up with anything, but they wanted to receive the supportive measures, which they are due and owed by us. 6 of those, we are still in initial discussions with them, so we're not sure where it's going. There are 3 that are under investigation, and 1 person that, as of October 1st, we are still attempting outreach for them. So 17 open cases as of October 1st. I thought it might be interesting to you as to what is actually reported on our campus, and so this is the list of the behaviors that could be that that could be reported that fall under the Title IX guidelines. And what I want you to notice is that, that if you look at sexual assault, which includes the first line, which is forcible rape, and also the fourth line, which is forcible fondling, that is 38% of the reports that we get. Sexual harassment, which is the second line, which includes a hostile environment, and a little bit further down, that is 18 of the 72. So those are our two biggest concerns with regard to the reports that, that we're getting. Okay, so these data were pulled together by our Title IX director, Josh Jones, our Title IX coordinator. As I said, all of the campuses' Title IX coordinators had to get that information by October 10th to their chancellor. All of them got it to their chancellor on time. By October 24th, the chancellor had to take a look at it and had to write a report and add a few other forms and send those to the president. That was completed also. On November 7th, the president has a report that is due to the Board of Supervisors, to you all. That was actually communicated to you, I believe, last night or this morning. So you have that, that report. And I want, continuing on, you have to turn around and get that to the Board of Regents by December 1st. And then the Board of Regents needs to get it to the Louisiana legislature by January 15th. Obviously, it keeps getting amalgamated, right, as we go up. So this, which you're not going to be able to see here, I hope you have a copy of the report. This is the report, and it shows you how all the different campuses, it kind of gives you a view of all of the campuses. So the columns are the campuses individually: LSU, A&M, AES, Health Science Centers, Ag Center, Pennington, so on and so forth. Going down the left in the rows, you can see that this is the data that is required. So the first row is the number of responsible employees on the campus. HR directors provided that information to the Title IX coordinator. Of those responsible employees, we were asked to tell what percentage of those people had actually completed the annual training, but there's a caveat here. It is how many had completed the annual training that was put on by the Board of Regents. So while most of our campus has 90% or better compliance with doing the annual training that's required on their campuses, starting next year, the Board of Regents is going to have a mandatory training that they are going to put on, that all responsible employees are going to have to take, and we are going to have to tell them how many people on our campuses have completed their training. So this is kind of socializing us to the way the form is going to work. At this point, the only people that are listed here are people who attended that August 18th workshop, which some of you were at. So the data look terrible, but for this line doesn't really count for this year. It's kind of a socialization thing. The next row is the number of confidential advisors that we have per law. Well, per Board of Regents recommendation, we're supposed to have one confidential advisor per 1,500 students, and all of our campuses meet that goal. So you can see the number of confidential advisors that are there per campus, and then each one of them needed to complete the Board of Regents training. We've had much higher success rate here because that is the training that they had to take, and it was available to them after they were selected. We do have one person on one campus who is on FMLA right now and hasn't completed it, but will when that person returns. The bottom half of this chart, this table, you can see the number of incidents of different types of power-based violence. And if you can look closely enough under LSU, A&M, which is the first column, you can see that there's a 3 there. Those are the 3 open cases that we're investigating. And there are also 2 in the Ag Center. And other than that, I believe they're all zeros. We have no instances of false reporting, and we have no instances on any campus of retaliation reports. So this is the information from all of the campuses put together, and this is in the report that you just received. Oh. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Cassidy.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate that very comprehensive report on this very important topic. Mr. Morrow, do you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I note that most of these events are felonies, forcible rape, things of that nature. Are these incidents, are they reported to the police?
In most cases, the person who has been victimized, at that point when it happens, we call them a victim, they have the choice of whether to report it to the police or not. I don't know, Josh, do you have a, you want to come up? Let me let Josh tell you about that. He's in the day-to-day more than I am.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I would say in most of our cases, the individuals do not want to report to the police, but we do provide them with the option. So we have, in some cases, had officers from Baton Rouge Police come to our office. They felt comfortable being interviewed in our office, so the officers came to our office. You can also report to the police through a phone number, so we can call right from our office with our case manager, call and make a police report through that phone line, and then they follow up and assign a detective to the case. So we've had that in a couple cases, but the majority of the folks going through our process have not wanted to go through the police criminal justice system, at least not yet. And we do see sometimes down the road, folks will change their mind and decide they do want to reach out to law enforcement.
I'm just wondering out loud, are we under an obligation once we are aware of a felony being committed, whether or not we necessarily have to call either the campus police or the city police? And does the city police or the campus police, do they follow up on these felony charges?
I'm not aware of any legal obligation. What we are obligated to do under the Clery Act is we do have to provide, because I am a CSA, so a Campus Security Authority, we do make a report, but we do not have to provide the name of the individual. So what we do is we would provide the type of crime, if it's on our Clery geography, so it happens on our campus in a program or activity, we would provide the crime, the location, and the date, but we would not provide the name unless the individual reporting wanted their name provided. And then that would go in the daily crime log for LSU PD.
Okay.
I got a quick question over here. Did we work out the issue with the police, if somebody reports to them, that they notify y'all?
Yes, we have. We also have a weekly meeting, a Title IX weekly meeting. And so Marshall, I'm blanking on the last name, Walters, I think, yep, from LSU PD is a representative of that committee. So, and that's to make sure that we're all aware of kind of what's happening as we can share information and make sure that we're not kind of letting anyone fall through the cracks between the two systems.
Right, and they've signed the agreement, Winston?
The MOU with law enforcement has not been signed.
We need to make that a priority,
We
because we get kicked in the teeth about it, and it's been over there, from what I understand, from what I've read in the paper, that they've had it, we're waiting on them to sign
This
it.
isn't our local police. No. We have an MOU we're drafting with BRPD, the district attorney's office, and the sheriff's office.
And that hasn't been signed?
No.
We're still drafting it?
No. It's been transmitted.
Drafted, they have it?
Yes.
Okay, we need to stay on them, squeaky wheel gets the grease, stay on them till they sign it. Because if we got to keep calling them out to sign it, until they sign it, we'll keep calling them out to sign it.
Yeah, there are a couple of minor issues with the law enforcement agencies and the types of information that they can share.
Oh, well, let's get it figured out, and let's report back next. I know we can have this monthly, on the agenda monthly, but that is very important that they sign it.
There is a deadline for that, Winston, isn't it? Isn't it January 1 that it must be signed?
It's January 1, yes.
Yeah.
How long have they had it?
It depends on the version Trey's
Well,
working.
when is the last version that we sent them that we want signed? When was the last time they got it to look at?
I don't know the exact date.
Was it last week?
It's probably in the last couple weeks.
Couple weeks. All right, well, we need to stay on them because it's pretty important. I mean, this is a big focus, not just here, it's everywhere. And we've been at the legislature for Poor Tom Galligan sat there for 13 hours, couldn't go to the bathroom over some of these issues, all of these issues. And one of them is what the police can say, what they can't say, when they can notify us, when we can't notify them, and all of that other garbage. So we need to make it priority number one that we get that signed. And I don't know why it takes so long to go all the way to January 1, but should be done. Thank you.
Dr. Cassidy,
Yes, sir.
it seems that you're going to have all these completed by the end of the year. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
It sounds like you'll have all these Blackwell issues completed by the end of the year. last three.
The 18 recommendations?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, they'll be done by the end of the year.
Good, that's very important. I want to circle back to what you were talking about, these sanctions. Where are you at with that?
So we have, our permanent memorandum 73 lists the ranges of things. So for example, it can be anything from, well, it can be all the way up to expulsion and suspension and probation, and we've got the list of them. What we need to create and what we're working on, and I've actually seen a draft of it, is a matrix. So, you know, it would take, it would be, say, like if you had rape, and then what are the considerations of that? You would, I mean, rape is not probably a really good one to choose, but since I said that, let's say sexual harassment. You know, has somebody been found responsible for that before? So there are multiple things that you would think of that could impact the sanction, and then we've got a hearing panel that they will go before, and they'll consider all of that and then decide on what the sanction would be, what the appropriate sanction would be for the perpetrator if they're found responsible.
In your research, well, how's your sanctions going to affect a tenured professor? Will it protect him?
No, there is a process by which faculty who are tenured can be dismissed for cause. And so that would be the process that would be used. And that's actually been revised fairly, I don't know, within the last couple of years to allow for these types of cases to go forward to dismiss for cause. Mm-hmm.
That's all I need to know.
Thank you. Supervisor Williams.
Yes. Thank you, Chair-elect Jones. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good.
I have a few issues, but the first one I'll bring up now is there's a category in the reporting that talks about outreach unsuccessful. And I recall you saying during the presentation that you make 3 attempts at outreach and that after that is sort of designated as outreach unsuccessful. Is that right?
Yes.
My question would be, is that best practices? Not to say you're not doing what's best, but I just mean, is there maybe a better way of saying it is there something else we could do? It seems that part of the problem in these situations is that if this is a power-based situation or someone feels intimidated or, you know, our program is just getting off the ground and so we don't have all the support and infrastructure in place and the person may not be comfortable, 3 attempts to reach them, I'm not saying it's unreasonable or reasonable, I'm just saying there could be a number of reasons why someone doesn't get back to us after 3 attempts at outreach, even though their claims might have merit. So I guess from a place of all of us wanting to know how we can make sure we capture those people, how do we arrive at sort of the 3 is the magic number? Is there some other backstop in place? What do we do about these folks?
Well, I'm going to give you the beginning answer, and then I'll let Josh chime in if he has anything to add to it. But one of the things that we hear from survivors a lot is that they just don't want to talk about it. They don't want any, they want to stop what they consider as harassing behavior of us, continually trying to get them to come and see us. So we do it, we have their phone numbers, so we send text messages, we do it by email, and we always make sure in that communication that they know how to get back in touch with us. That, okay, this is our 3rd time, we won't bother you anymore. Here's our phone number, here's our website, here's where you can find. A lot of the resources that we talk to survivors about are already on our website. So if they want to go and find that out themselves, we give them directions for that. But it really comes down to survivors not wanting to be harassed. And I would imagine that's a tough place to be. I don't know, Josh, you have anything, you want to add anything?
I don't think 3 attempts is a magic number, I think, but so one of the things I'll say, the case management system we're using, our outreach always starts off by email, and we can actually track whether or not the email has been opened. So if the email hasn't been opened, we're going to make sure we pursue a little bit more because Students get a lot of emails. We all get a lot of emails. It's really easy for that email just to kind of fall through the cracks and not to open it. So when they get the email, they actually have to put in their 8-9 number. That's how we secure to make sure that no one else can read this email. And once they put in that 8-9 number, it triggers in our system that they've opened the email. If they're not opening their emails, then we're going to follow up via text or calls in other ways. I think it's just important to remember that it can be very triggering to some of these students, right, to continuously get an email that says Office of Civil Rights and Title IX on it. And so we just want to make sure we find that balance of trying to get folks in, but also not flooding their inbox and kind of causing this, every time I see this email, I relive this moment, and I don't want to relive this moment. I think especially because we're getting a lot of what I'll call accidental disclosures from folks. As we continue through our mandatory reporting and we get that out to students, there are still students that kind of don't know the reporting or don't necessarily know that what they're doing will trigger that email. So working with students so that they know where we are, when they can reach out to us. And we do get a lot of folks that come back 6 months later and say, you know what, I didn't respond to your email, but I'm ready now. I'd like to move forward.
Supervisor Warner?
Is there any other conversation? If not, I'd like to make a motion.
Great.
Well, before you go, Madam Chair, if I can make just ask one question of Dr. Cassidy. I think earlier in your presentation you mentioned that we had hired a firm to audit our actions post Hush Blackwell implementation. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, it's Baker Tilly is the name of the group.
Okay, great. I agree with Mr. Zusas. That's critically important.
Yes.
And I appreciate you making
Yeah, we do too. We want to make sure we need to get this right, period. We need to get this right.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
And we're committed to that.
Thank you.
Supervisor Williams, another question?
I'm sorry, I won't. Last question from me. I noticed that there were 2 accident investigations closed for lack of jurisdiction.
Yes.
You gave a number of different, I think, categories on slide 7 about things that could be considered lack of jurisdiction. In the situation where the lack of jurisdiction is because a person's no longer with the university, and I don't know if that's the Ag Center explanation or not, but what happens, what can we do? In other words, if someone's gone, is there just no investigation? I feel like that would have, and you can comment on, I feel like that would have the danger of leaving the victim feeling a little unsatisfied if we couldn't do the investigation because the person's no longer there, because some facts should still be hanging out around campus even though the perpetrator might be gone. So what's the thinking there in terms of not following through with the investigation, particularly in a situation where the victim might still be here but the perpetrator's moved on?
Right, so I'm going to say one thing and then turn it over to Josh. But the one thing I would say is that as long as a victim/survivor is here as an LSU student, we are committed to providing them with supportive measures. So we don't completely, to try to help them to heal. I know you're asking specifically about what's going to happen to the perpetrator. But I do want you to know that first of all the survivors, as long as they're at LSU, we take care of them. So Josh, you want to?
And Josh says you're coming to the mic, and I appreciate that because that's vital.
I know that's not what you're asking.
But it's a helpful part of it, and to the extent part of it is also shedding light on what the perpetrator did, and to the extent there's some value both in the healing process and to our efforts as a university in exposing things that happen. I would hate for someone to feel like if I just pull the parachute and leave this university before they investigate, then all of my dastardly deeds will never come to light.
So let me add one more thing in here. Because of the good work of the Board of Regents, we now have a, what do they call it, transcript notation policy, which is if somebody has filed a claim with a Title IX claim at LSU and they transfer to another institution, or try to transfer to another institution, we have some notation on their transcript that says that they are, what did we end up with? That they're, it's pending administrative matter or something, and the incoming university can call us and ask what that is, and we can tell them that it's a Title IX violation. So that will follow them if they are in the middle of it, if something has been filed against them and it hasn't been completed yet. But Josh, you want to?
And that's if the perpetrator is a student, right? So if the perpetrator is a
That's
faculty member or
correct.
staff, is there some similar notation that will follow them? I know I'm throwing a lot
Yeah.
out that raises a...
No, I don't think so. I'd have to ask HR about that, but there aren't formal documents that HR has that they would send to another employer. It would be up to another employer to call us and say, is there any reason we shouldn't hire this person?
Okay, so as you answer, Josh, that takes me back to my original question. I would hate for us to have a situation where someone a staff, sounds like we have something in place for student level person, but staff or faculty does something awful, the heat is on because we're now after them, they leave, and then there's no investigation, certainly resources available for the victim, no investigation or ramifications for the perpetrator, nothing following them to the next university where they do it again and again and again. What do we have in place?
Mr. Williams, we would indicate on their HR record that they are not eligible for rehire. We can't put any information about pending matters. We are very conservative in who gives recommendations. You can't just call anyone on campus and get a recommendation for it. It's supposed to go through HR and a single person who will indicate that that employee would not be eligible for rehire. And that is about all we can do.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, so there's two circumstances where I think this happens. So one circumstance is a complainant has made a complaint, the investigation has started, and then the student, so our policy says we can continue with the investigation even if they leave. So the situation where we wouldn't do an
That's good to hear.
Yeah, so the information, where we wouldn't is, let's say it happened a year ago, between the incident and now, either the student graduated or the employee left the institution. They come forward, they say, I want you to know that this happened to me while I was here at LSU. And let's say they did ask for an investigation. That's a situation where we couldn't do an investigation because, you use the term shed light on what happened, but we wouldn't have the other party there. I mean, due process would but I think it is important to know that if that investigation starts, they can't just kind of leave and that causes the investigation to stop, because that investigation will keep going.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or discussion? Thank you.
I do have a follow-up question on a matter that we discussed a lot with the Legislative Committee. I know the Board of Regents is creating a new survey, and you spoke about encouraging students to participate. I heard time and time again. Dr. Galligan heard it. My fellow supervisors heard it. How do we get students to participate in these surveys? They're surveyed out. I know we try technology. We try all these different things. What is the plan for LSU to encourage our students to participate? Because we want to go back to Board of Regents and the Legislative Committee saying, look, we're trying to be successful in this. And I think that's just a bear that's hard to figure out how to attack.
Great question. I wish I had like the magic answer to all of this. However, one of the things that we have is a President-Student Task Force. They are 11 student leaders from a variety of groups on campus. We meet with them fairly regularly, and so we are going to rely on them to help us get this information out. And student government, we're going to have to depend on the students to help us with this, but we also will make sure that there's plenty of information on websites and through emails, social media. We have a social media campaign going on right now at the A&M campus, and we'll work with the other campuses as well, because all of these things have to happen on all campuses. I'm told right now, don't ever send stuff an email if you want students. You put it on Instagram and TikTok. Not even Facebook and TikTok, right? So we will be doing all of that, using social media to our advantage, and then using student leaders to try to help us get the information out.
Are we thinking about an incentive program? I know some universities and colleges use incentive programs. I know that's can be costly, but you got to use enticements where we can find them, or some kind of competition between our campuses to get people to participate.
You want to come serve on the committee? You get some good ideas. We will do whatever it takes, and we will bring people together. We haven't really, we haven't had that discussion yet, but there are a lot of things that we can do, and we will do everything within our power to get that number up.
I just want to be sure that regions and the legislature see that we are doing.
Yes.
We're attacking this from every possible angle and trying to get them the information that they need to keep creating the policy that's going to keep our campuses and our students safe.
Yes, and frankly, it's information that we need for our office to be successful. We need to understand the climate.
Absolutely.
Because once you understand it, you know where your weaknesses are. So.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mallett, do you have a question?
It sounds like y'all have done a good job on the student side. Let's get back to this employee side. How can they get away with that if they do a Title IX violation? Is there a federal law that stops us from reporting that? I mean, how do they get away with it, but a student can't? Ms. Torres, I guess. Well, why can't we, why is it, all we can say is what we hire? How is an employee, whether it be a faculty or an employee, get away with doing a Title IX violation at this university, and us not putting something on his record so that the next university knows that this has happened?
If they're,
Is there a law? Or
if
is
they're,
there policy?
if they're fired for cause, we typically, and I'm going to defer to Winston.
What if he resigns?
We're typically very,
So
okay.
what if he knows it's coming, so he resigns and leaves? He's under investigation. How do you protect the next university from this particular person from committing it? They need to know that this person is possibly, I would want to know if they were coming to us.
I absolutely agree with you. We struggle with the same thing with theft. If an employee commits a theft or embezzlement, and we do background checks, so that if there is some type of criminal complaint, we will find out about the theft or the embezzlement. The same thing should occur with any employer that's hiring to do the background check. But we can't divulge information about an employee. They're so, and Winston, you will help me out with it.
Help me out, because James couldn't help me.
The difficulty we have is being a public employer. When you annotate somebody's employment record as if you've done something wrong, you are essentially depriving them of a property interest. You're affecting their ability to earn income. And a state agency can't make that deprivation without providing certain minimal levels of due process. So for example, a civil service employee who's accused of wrongdoing and goes through a civil service hearing, we can publicly say they were accused of wrongdoing, proved of that wrongdoing, and we can refer that to the next employer. But an unclassified employee who serves at will, more often than not, disappears on us. And it becomes really difficult for us to deprive them of a property interest when we can't give them as much as notice or afford them any due process, because that's what happens when we annotate that. And the difficulty is we are a public employer and we have to provide more due process than a private employer would ever have to provide.
So are you saying you would need statutory help?
Pardon me?
Are you telling me that we need to get the legislature to do something statutorily to fix this?
The hard part is the due process clause is the federal constitution. It would be difficult for the legislature to alter.
It seems like a really good loophole for someone wanting to do something and get away with it.
Yeah, it's not a loophole as much as it's a protected liberty interest that we have to deal with. And so
in this particular case, it's a loophole.
Yeah.
If he's accused of this and then decides to resign and leave, you've created a loophole.
Yeah. What we generally do is we have defended advising future employers. They're not eligible for rehire with us, and most employers will read into that what that really means.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or discussion? Okay, at this time, we need a motion to accept the report to be forwarded to the Board of Regents.
Madam
Supervisor
Chair.
Warner?
Madam Chair, I wish to make a motion that the report provided in compliance with Act 472 of the 2021 regular legislative session be accepted by the committee and be recommended to the board for approval.
I second it.
Supervisor Warner moves and is seconded by Supervisor Zuschlag. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any objection? The ayes have it. The motion is approved. Dr. Cassidy, I'd like to just thank you for all of the hard work that you all have been doing in your department to ensure the safety and well-being of the students, faculty, and staff here at LSU. It's greatly appreciated. I know that you mentioned in your report that this is just the beginning. The hard work starts now. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Could I say one quick thing? On this, the number of people completion of annual training, this, is there a caveat that you can put in the report? Because when the Board of Regents sees that only 6 people out of 9,000, they're going to be mad.
Well, first of all, the full report that you got explains that in it, but the second thing that I could say is if anybody complains about it, I have the email from them that tells us, yes, you should report only 7 people attended that session, and it will be less than 1%.
Okay, just somewhere that they know
It
that,
is.
because if they see that, they're going to be mad right off.
Yeah, so if you read further in the report, it is explained there why that.
But some people may not read further in the report, they're just going to see that number. I'd like a little asterisk on that.
Okay, would you like a little asterisk? We can certainly put that in.
Just to refer them down to the explanation.
Yep,
Because
absolutely.
it's pretty glaring.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I also want to applaud you all. I know you're going to start your day early tomorrow with some Title IX training put on by STAR. That is, you're going to meet with Rebecca Marciafava and Tanya Rowell for that, and I appreciate that you think this is so important that you're considering this part of your board meeting. So thank you, Chairman Starnes, for making that happen.
Thank you again, Dr. Cassidy. Is there a motion to adjourn the committee? Is there a second? Second. Any objection? Without objection, the motion is approved. That concludes our business. Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Supervisor Jones. Supervisor Armentor, would you convene the academic committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Griffith, please call the roll of the academic committee.
Mr. Armentor,
Here.
Mr. Morrow,
Here.
Ms. Aguilera,
Here.
Mr. Damp. Here. Ms. Jones. Here. Mr. Woods. Here. Mr. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, there's a quorum.
Dr. Matt Lee will present the academic committee items.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. We have one item on the regular agenda today. It is a request from LSU Alexandria to establish the Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences. This degree allows students who have earned an Associate of Applied Arts or an Associate of Applied Sciences at an accredited community college to transfer 60 hours of lower-level credits to the proposed baccalaureate program. This completed degree is the first of its kind in Louisiana, but it is certainly not unique in the nation, with Texas having at least 20 institutions of higher education offering the same. The Board of Regents was pleased to approve the letter of intent for this program because it aligns with their master plan to increase educational attainment of Louisiana citizens to 60% for all working-age adults by 2030. This program is particularly attractive for veteran and military students, and it's flexible because it allows for articulation agreements with disciplines such as culinary arts and fire and emergency services. The potential pool of students is high. 10,818 associate's degrees were awarded in Louisiana in 2019 alone. If the proposed degree is approved, LSUA will partner with community colleges in the region and in the state to develop clear pathways from current associate-level applied programs to the Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences. The program projects to enroll 55 students in the first year, increasing to 100 by year 5. Tuition and fee revenues will more than cover the expenses for this program. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions? If none, is there a motion to recommend the proposal as presented?
So moved.
By Mr. Morrow, and a second? By Mr. Danf. Ms. Griffith, please conduct the roll call vote of this committee.
Mr. Armentor,
Yes.
Mr. Morrow,
Yes.
Mr. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Damp.
Yes.
Ms. Jones. Mr. Woods. Mr. Williams. 4 yeas, none opposed.
The yeas have it, and the recommendation is approved. Dr. Lee, consent agenda?
Yes, sir. We have 6 items on the consent agenda for consideration. The first is a request from LSU A&M to change the degree designation of the Master of Digital Media Arts and Engineering to the Master of Science in Digital Media Arts and Engineering. The name change is at the request of the accrediting body, the National Association of Schools of Art and Design, because the degree is more arts-focused than engineering. The next three items are from LSU Eunice. The Competitive Endowed Two-Year Student Workforce Scholarship Subprogram provides scholarship opportunities for students on two-year campuses to enter the Louisiana workforce by training students for immediate entrance into selected high-demand 4- and 5-star jobs, including positions in nursing and allied health, and/or to prepare students to become job-ready in STEM fields after completing degrees on 4-year campuses. The Acadian Medical Center Pink Ladies are endowing $20,000. The Florence Mabouls Trust is endowing $20,000, and a second Fritz Lang Scholarship is endowing $50,000. The next item is a request from the LSU Ag Center to establish the Rice Research Board Chair of Rice Variety Development. The Louisiana Rice Research Board, a political subdivision of the state of Louisiana, voted to create a second rice chair. There's already one in rice research. This one will be for rice variety development. Lastly, we have a request from the LSU A&M to award a posthumous degree for Mr. Rishi Banda. Mr. Rishi Reddy Banda received his BA in economics from LSU A&M in the fall of 2017. He then began his graduate studies in the online Flores MBA program in October 2020. At the time of his passing in July of 21, Mr. Banda was enrolled in the required coursework and on track to complete his degree in the summer of 2021. The E.J. Uso College of Business at LSU considered Mr. Banda to be one of the college's most promising students and was on track to become an outstanding business professional. If approved, the awarding of this degree allows LSU to acknowledge Mr. Banda's academic achievements and provide his family with a symbol of appreciation of his talents and the life that he shared with us. Thank you for your consideration of these items.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Are there any questions of the supervisor? If none, is there a motion to recommend the proposal as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Danf, and seconded by Mr. Morrow. Ms. Griffith, would you please conduct the roll call vote?
Mr. Armenter?
Yes.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Damp?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Mr. Woods? Mr. Williams? 4 yeas, none opposed.
The yeas have it, and the recommendation is approved. Is there a motion to adjourn the committee?
So moved.
By Mr. Morrow. With no objection, the committee is adjourned. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Armentor. Supervisor Brown, would you convene the Finance Committee?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Brown?
Here.
Mr. Woods?
Here.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Blossman?
Here.
Mr. Mallett?
Here.
Ms. Werner?
Here.
Mr. Zuflaw?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith. Ms. Torres, would you please present the first item of business?
Sure. Our first item is a recommendation to approve the fiscal year 22-23 operating budget. Just last board meeting, we approved the fiscal year 22 budget, the year that we are now in. We are beginning the process for the fiscal year 23 budget. All of the campus and entities detailed their request. The budget request formula campuses use is prepared under instructions issued by the state, and modifications are made to our existing operating budget. The total budget request for state funds for formula campuses is submitted to the Board of Regents, to the then to the Division of Administration and the legislature with a request for funding. The budget request was made or considered by the Board of Regents on October 20th and was approved on October 20th. The campuses also submit information about expanded and operational need activities. And the those details are included in your package. The main requests that were made were for additional funding for faculty and staff raises and to recruit additional faculty, for Title IX funding, for research initiatives, for deferred maintenance, and funding to bring all salaries up to a $15 an hour limit, or per hour amount. We still have employees that make less than $10 an hour on our campuses. So what we're asking is first for you to authorize the president or their designee to approve the preliminary budget request for fiscal year '23. Second, that you authorize and delegate to the president authorization to continue to work with the Board of Regents on the appropriate formula methodology and budget request for LSU. And then third, that you approve the campus's request for expanded and operational needs.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Are there any questions?
I just got one question. Do you have a guesstimate of either how many people or what percentage of the folk that work at LSU earn less than $15 an hour?
It is very few. Mr. Temple, last year we were successful in getting all of our custodial staff up to an entry level of $10 an hour and then further bumping them. We also added a third custodial level so that as they progress in their career, they move to different levels, which affords them higher pay. The group that we're going to work with now are the folks that are in our landscape. And it is probably 100, 150 people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions?
Yeah, Mr. Brown, could you expand a little bit more on what the operational expansive needs you're talking about?
So every year, the board asks us to put together each campus, and it's a wish list. If you were able to get additional funding, what is it you would want that funding for?
Can you give me an example? Pick one of the satellites. What's an example of that?
Excuse me?
Give me an example of what's on the wish list for one of them.
Faculty and staff raises, money for deferred maintenance, money for the civil rights and Title IX unit that we're establishing, additional funding for research, and then across the campuses, there are different initiatives for programs that they want to expand.
And what number do you have on this wish list?
The total number, I can give you that. It is about $100 million.
Well, I trust it. I trust the president to handle that properly.
We keep asking relentlessly.
So these requests, wish lists, are potential, this potential revenue is all driven by what's decided at the legislature?
Correct. More so, it's determined by the additional amount of money that is included in our formula funding. And I believe that they take these lists and determine from these lists how much money, and the list, this is the list for the LSU system. You've also got Southern, the Community and Technical College system, and the UL system. So together, they take the list and ask for an additional amount of money for higher ed funding.
On the last budget, are we continually each year putting something towards this wish list or these items that you're requesting? Have we been sending any money at all? Yeah, from what you're talking, we haven't done anything at all. Are we sending any money at all?
Are they sending any money?
Us, approve it. Are we having any money towards what you're asking in the past? Like last year, did we do any money at all?
Yes, last year we got funding for faculty raises.
Okay, that was all we got done.
And we also got funding for mandated cost, our cost of the retirement match and the health insurance match.
So we are attempting to do it based upon how the money's flowing in.
Correct. This year, we actually worked with the Board of Regents, and when they funded faculty raises last year, they only funded instructional faculty. They did not include faculty that have a research position. So when we did the raises, LSU's budget had to cover the amount of those raises. So we spoke with the board this year to expand that they not put a type to faculty or a type to staff, that they include all faculty and staff for higher ed.
What was their reason for doing it like that?
I think they were trying to minimize the amount of money that was requested for raises, but also there was a school of thought to bring the instructional faculty salaries up to the Southern regional average.
And not worry about the research guy? People?
And that was our point when we worked with them on the budget request this year, that we need to be concerned about all of our faculty and speak about the compression that we are experiencing as we bring new faculty in, we bring them in at market rates. Well, that creates a compression of salaries with our faculty and our staff that have been here for a number of years.
So you think they're going to be better this year? Do you think you're going to work on trying to get it, I'm sure?
I think that we will get additional funding for our faculty raises. The jury is still out on staff raises. Higher ed is very different from the rest of the state in that in most state agencies, only the appointed officials are what we call unclassified employees. The rest of the rank and file are classified, and there is a process to provide for raises for them on a regular basis.
So the other place to get revenue would be for us to go to the legislature, correct?
That would be the best thing to do, but I'm looking at our president to make sure that we keep all our priorities in order as we request. As a staff member, I would love for you to go on my behalf and advocate for myself and my peers.
But I think that I would go if you came with me.
Okay. And
I think it would be in the best interest if a group of people such as yourself, if you wanted to do that on top of what the president's request that we normally do, I think that the legislature would not be adverse. At least we can't. It wouldn't hurt to go ask. They can't. All they can do is tell us no, which we have all to gain. So I'm not against us trying that. I think that as chairman of governmental affairs, I think that's one of the issues that we're trying to do is build that communication between us and the legislature, so that we can go back and ask for other things other than what we typically have been asking. Because I think that it's very important that, from a faculty standpoint, if we're going to continue to grow and continue to bring good people to this university, we've got to get our numbers up. I do agree with that.
I agree with you. One of the pieces of information, the data that we provided this year, was to show the number of staff that we have by salary brackets. because the thought is that unclassified employees all make six-figure incomes. Well, I started at 25 to 40,000, and then 40 to 50, 50 to 60, so that we could demonstrate that these are not highly paid employees that we're asking or advocating on their behalf for raises on a regular basis.
I think if you put a presentation, because I think you're quite capable of it, and we presented it to the legislature ahead of time to key people, and then went to the legislature before committee, I think we've got a great chance of being successful. But if we don't try, I know what's going to happen. But I'm willing to work on that with you and try to get that done.
Very good.
One other question, where does LSU stand? You mentioned the southern region, the average pay in the southern region. Where does LSU stand in terms of the southern region average pay scale for the professional folk that work at the university?
Professional folks, we're probably in the third quartile. We're not at the bottom, but we're not at the average either.
We're not at 50%.
We're a little better than 50%, between 50 and 75%. And I have a chart that I could share with you that lays it out more clearly.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Thank you, Ms. Torres.
You're welcome.
Dan?
Did we get funding from the legislature last year for campus-wide lighting? Was there?
We did.
Okay.
We did. And we are working on that project.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just add, Mr. Mallett, I think this is a good year for us to make an extra effort. The state has about $600 million in surplus. Now, a lot of it's going to be dedicated to different pots. Not sure what that'll translate to next year's budget, but
That's my thought too. I knew they had some extra money.
it's
So they would be
definitely,
able to-
we're definitely in a real positive situation with the state finance. If there are no other questions, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Mallett, a second? Second. Ms. Warner? Ms. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here, yes, I'm here.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Blossman? Mr. Mallett?
Yes.
Ms. Werner?
Yes.
Mrs. Zuschlaw?
Yes.
5 yeas, none opposed.
Okay, well, thank you, it passes. Ms. Torres, would you present the next item, please?
Sure. The next item is a request to authorize the university to enter into a contract for a student information system. The university is seeking to upgrade its student information system from the mainframe-based COBOL technology that we currently utilize. After a nearly 40-year lifespan, it is time for us to bring in new technology. A new student information system will provide a variety of advantages in both the changing mission and strategic goals of the university. We will have additional capabilities to the user while yielding more financial predictability by being more sustainable. The student information system will provide enhanced business intelligence and analytical capabilities. Primary benefits to the upgrade include a subscription-based software as a service model that promises better business continuity outcomes, configurable system functionality, taking the place of customized code that's difficult to maintain, greater and more efficient access to usable student data, simplified integration methodology with other industry software and services, and simplified workflow and processes for students, faculty, and staff. To maximize these benefits across LSU and take advantage of economies of scale, the implementation will include LSU A&M, LSU at Alexandria, LSU Eunice, and LSU Shreveport. The fiscal impact is, first, the subscription cost. The amount is based on the number of full-time equivalent students at each campus. Workday's proposal quoted the subscription cost at $52.52 per student. At our current enrollment levels, that cost is approximately $1.9 million annually. The second significance is the one-time implementation cost for a new student information system. Deloitte has been identified by Workday as the implementation partner for the project. Implementation costs will be dependent on the number and complexity of configurations, integrations, and change management services. The competitive process description, there was a collaboration between Academic Affairs, LSU Information Technology, and LSU Procurement that began in February 2021 with an invitation to negotiate. A comprehensive evaluation team comprised of enterprise-wide stakeholders in academics, finance, and information technology reviewed the responses to the invitation to negotiate and selected Workday as the most responsive proposal to the needs of the university. The documents have been reviewed by LSU Information Technology, LSU Procurement Services, and the Office of General Counsel. Parties of interest are LSU and Workday. And we request that you authorize the president or his designee in consultation with General Counsel to execute the agreement with Workday.
And Ms. Torres, my understanding is that it's difficult to hire people that are familiar with Cobalt since there are less users, and also this will eliminate the need of hardware purchases related to Cobalt, and it really will put us in line with other major universities.
That's correct. We are depending upon re-employed retirees for much of our system maintenance right now, because COBOL is a very antiquated language that it's typically only higher ed, and we found out during the pandemic that a lot of the federal government and municipalities were also still using COBOL. But Workday moving to the software as a service will put us in a different stature in that we will no longer have to hire programmers. The programming for the system is done by Workday. We buy a subscription along with all other users. And as there are system modifications needed because of law changes, or just because of better practices, Workday actually funds the analyst to make those changes, and everyone using the system has the benefit of that software as a service or that subscription.
Good, and we've discussed this at previous meetings too, so. Any questions?
Yeah. So, when you go to the people who, they all gave proposals, and it was reviewed by LSU's people?
Yes.
So Workday was one of how many proposals?
One of 3 or 4. There were 2, I think there were 4 that actually made proposals. There were 2 that reached final consideration, and it was determined that Workday would be the better partner for LSU.
Dollars and cents, were they close in their bids, or there was a big difference, if you can recall?
And I can recall, it wasn't so much the financial aspect, it was the fact that the other software vendor did not truly have software as a service. What they were going to provide to us was a series of software packages that would have to integrate with each other and then feed back to LSU. Our preference is the software as a service that we're actually using now for our HR and all of our finance, where it is a fully integrated one system.
Makes sense.
Yes, sir, Dr. Tate.
You're asking really good questions. Just as a history lesson, I took COBOL my freshman year in college. And at that time, it was considered to be almost a training environment as opposed to something you would really be doing in real time. So to say we're using it right now is a tremendous risk to this institution. The human capacity associated with is they're retired and just coming back doing us a favor, basically. And that's what we're talking about. The other dilemma, and I wasn't here for all of this, but I know from my past experiences where we were attempting to make a decision about Workday or someone else, the market at this juncture really is Workday, and it's Workday, and it's just Workday.
Right.
Because the other entities really don't cater to institutions like our type. And Workday is the only one really with a history of working with higher ed. That said, I would not want to lead this board down any other pathway to tell you that this is going to be one of the most challenging implementations that we will do in the history of LSU. This is going to be a major heavy lift, even with Workday and their expertise, because Workday is really coming into the academic marketplace, attempting to figure it out. Fortunately, places like Ohio State and others were the guinea pigs, and we can learn from their lessons and not make some of the same mistakes. That's the only advantage we have right now. Some other big universities went out front. Washington University, where I was before, is following right after Ohio State. We can leverage things they learned as well because they used it in the medical school front. They had a different system, but very modified and similar. But we can take advantage of the lessons learned. But this is going to be absolutely a heroic lift we're going to have to do to make this work.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion.
Who made the motion?
Me. Right here.
Mr. Mallett, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Zuschlag. So, would you please call the roll? Ms. Griffith?
Mr. Brown?
Here, yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Blossman?
Yes.
Mr. Mallett?
Yes.
Ms. Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Zuschlag?
Yes.
6 yeas, none opposed.
Okay, recommendation has been approved. Mr. Torres, the final, well, go ahead with the next item, please.
Okay, the final item is a request from LSU A&M to authorize the issuance of auxiliary revenue refunding bonds. We would like to advance refund all or a portion of the series 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2016A auxiliary revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $165 million to take advantage of an estimated net present value savings of $8.6 million calculated as of October 1, 2021. The savings will benefit the LSU Student Union, athletics, residential life, university recreation, the laboratory school, and parking and transportation services. The legal documents have been reviewed by bond counsel and special counsel to the board and by the Office of Accounting Services. All of the parties relevant to the approval of the refunding of the prior bonds do not have any related interest in the refunding, nor will they receive any financial gain from this approval. Related transactions are the resolution adopted by the board on June 8th, 2021, March 18th, 2023, September 12th, 2014, and October 21st, 2016, issuing the respective series of the prior bonds. So we would ask for your approval to enter into this transaction to affect interest savings.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Temple.
So we're repurposing these bonds, and will the life of the bonds change?
Yes, sir.
And the rates will be reduced and have an $8.5 million savings?
Correct.
That's simple enough.
Good math. Any other questions? If none, we would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Zuslag, and we have Mr.
Second.
Mallett second.
Yes.
Would you call roll, please, Ms. Griffin?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Blossman?
Yes.
Mr. Mallett?
Yes.
Ms. Werner?
Yes.
Mrs. Zuschlag?
Yes.
6 yeas, none opposed.
Okay, well, the motion passes, and,
Mr. Brown, we do have one more item. Supplier diversity.
update on diversity.
I asked that that be placed on the agenda, so I would like to hear it now.
Okay.
If I could.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
So we have an update on our supplier diversity program, and I'm going to move to the podium. I want to introduce everyone to Tiffany Robinson. Ms. Robinson is the manager of supplier diversity and supplier enrollment in our Office of Procurement.
Okay.
Tiffany's been with us for
13 years.
13 years. She has been in procurement since she has been at the university and has moved through the ranks in a number of more responsible positions. I am thrilled when I asked Tiffany to step into the interim role when our supplier diversity manager, director left us recently, and she said she would consider it, moved into the interim role, and then subsequently just today accepted the new position. So your timing was impeccable, Mr. Starnes. So, can y'all bring up the PowerPoint? So, as I just said, supplier diversity has moved into procurement services. Previously, it was part of procurement services. It was moved out to be a separate entity. But I feel like when it was a separate entity, it just missed the synergy of being a part of the procurement office. Right now, we are in the process of reviewing campus procedures, documents, and qualifying diverse business classifications. All of our internal procedures and processes are being developed and documented, and we're re-evaluating the applicable spend model due to changes in spend categories and ledger accounts. When we moved a lot of the supplier diversity information over from the legacy system into Workday, there was not good cleanup done. There was an audit that took place in fiscal year 21, and we're addressing the findings in that audit. One of the biggest findings was the issues that we had in the diverse supplier database. There are a total of 1,843 diverse suppliers in Workday, but 1,608 do not have current certifications on file. Communications are being sent to suppliers for recertification efforts, and our Workday classifications are going to be reconfigured on our supplier records to make it easier for us to identify diverse suppliers, and then we can create some reports tied to classifications of suppliers. The fiscal year 21 report of diverse supplier spend is still being finalized. We're missing the fourth quarter tier 2 spend from some suppliers. We're awaiting some first quarter fiscal year 22 suppliers, so we'll be able to report, hopefully at our next board meeting, what that spend looks like. And we're also exploring how to incorporate La Carte spend. La Carte spend is credit card spend. We're going to also begin receiving reports from our new travel manager, our new contracted travel agency, Christopherson Business Travel, and they are a certified women-owned business that will add to our tier 1 spend. We're working with IT to develop a form that departments can use to request diverse supplier recommendations for solicitations. And Tiffany spent a lot of time developing communication across the campus, developing trainings on diversifying department supplier spend, developing training on procurement readiness so that diverse suppliers are ready for solicitation and contracting. And then we're working with the Office of Community and University Partnerships to rebrand and promote supplier diversity. Tiffany has become involved in the Charity Hospital Project and participates in the bi-weekly meetings so that she receives updates on and obtains reports for the DBE spend on that engagement. And the actual construction for the Charity Hospital Project is slated to begin in January 2022. So why don't you talk about your partnerships?
Recently, we've joined with athletics to participate in their Diverse Supplier Committee program. They have done some amazing things in trying to capture numbers and spend across the different sports within the athletics unit, and just trying to push supplier diversity in every way, shape, and form, as well as just diversity and inclusion among the team members and other students and faculty and staff by supporting events across the city whenever they travel to different towns for games. We also were asked to participate in the WEBEC Certification Committee. So Elizabeth and I, who works in the Supplier Diversity Unit, we both are members of that certification committee where we get to listen to, review, and vote on women-owned businesses for certification. And then recently we were invited to present at the virtual business event that the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport held last month to provide information to the DBE groups around the city and state. And it was very eye-opening to find out that there are other institutions, namely the City of Baton Rouge, that's starting a program for certification. So planning to build some resources with them and continue to grow the business.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead. You go first, Mr. Chair. Mr. Past Chair.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Good, or nice to see you again. Good afternoon. I'm gonna temper my frustration because I don't think anybody in this room was in charge of this program before now. But I want to say that where we are is very unacceptable. And everybody up here has heard me say this before. Y'all have heard me say this before, but I do think I need to be on the record about how just completely unacceptable it is where this program is. Again, qualifying that y'all are both new to the role. Mr. President, you're new to the role. But I think it's important, given the magnitude of this program, to talk about how we got here. 6 years ago, when Valencia Jones, Glenn Armentor, and I joined this board, the board was about to pass a master concessions contract for all of athletics which was worth, I think, about $250 million or something like that. The contract had no provision in it to ensure that any of that money would be spent with disadvantaged groups, which is unheard of in 2016, but we didn't have it. Out of that outrage grew an effort to have a supplier diversity program. And respectfully, partnering with groups in the community should be a very infinitesimal part of what we're doing, because we need to focus on diversifying how we spend our money. That has always been the priority, and part of the biggest problem with this effort has been it was more focused on outreach and job fairs and other stuff like that. And I see you, Ms. Torres, reacting, so I'll become specific. I can do that too.
Okay, because I want to talk
Rejoining,
about
perfect,
construction.
perfect. You want to talk about what?
Construction, and, I mean, I got asked to do this.
Yeah, I don't know, hold on, how about this? Let me finish, and then you can talk about construction and all the other things you want to talk about. Because we spend money on, what I'm not gonna do, just personally, is say, well, since we're in the charity hospital program, we should be glad with that. Or we're doing a construction project, so isn't that good enough? This needs to be a robust program across the entire system. I'm gonna go through my concerns. This position is now rejoining procurement. I defer to y'all about where it should be, but I want to point out the history of the reason why it was moved. It was moved because when it was under procurement, it was completely ignored and marginalized. And the person who was in that role, not the person who just left the role, but the person before that, expressed a feeling that the program was being diminished in procurement. And so it was moved from procurement and elevated to the CFO level to hopefully make procurement understand that this is something that needed to be dealt with system-wide. So I do have a concern that now that we're gonna stick it back under procurement, though that may be a natural fit, if it doesn't have the teeth in it, nobody's going to follow it. I'm concerned that Ms. Robinson is a manager and not a director or some other higher position, because it is her responsibility to make sure that the entire system, all of our campuses, Pennington, Ag Center, Shreveport, that we have a supplier diversity in place, Alexandria, Eunice. Every one of these campuses, Ms. Robinson or whoever's gonna serve in this role, and it's Ms. Robinson at this point, is in charge of all of that. And at a manager level, when she goes and calls on Nancy Sorensen and says, this needs to happen, now she's gonna work with it out of the kindness of her heart, but in terms of a chain of command kind of thing, it doesn't give Ms. Robinson much strength to go in at the manager level. That's something this board has addressed several times. I don't think that it's been handled. When I see things like processes being developed and documented 6 years into a program, or whenever we first brought it up 6 years, I think we passed it 5 years ago, we've been fooling around with it. We've had 2 heads of this program in 5 years. We're on our 3rd now. Developing campus training on diversifying the department spend, that's something that should have happened long ago. And again, I know a lot of this is none of your faults, but everybody else sitting in this audience has been a part of these discussions. You know, we have not moved this forward. And LSU finds itself in a hell of a bad position in other sensitive areas where we didn't resource it properly because we didn't think it was necessary or advantageous to us. And now look at us. And here we are with another situation where we have not resourced it adequately, and until it blows up on us, we're not gonna pay any attention to it. And I am very, very, very frustrated with the lack of progress we've made, not just in terms of the number of disadvantaged. I mean, there are women-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses all across this state that could benefit from the amount of money that LSU spends on a yearly basis. And I'm not talking about, with all respect to making sure we track credit card spending, I ain't talking about what you can buy on a credit card. Right. I'm not. At all. So, I'm happy to see a change in the landscape. But we've seen changes in the landscape before, and now we're going back and trying things that we've tried before. Rejoining procurement really concerns me. I defer to the professionals, and that's you, and that's the president, But that concerns me a lot for the reason that we moved it in the first place. But if y'all can figure out how to keep it under procurement, but people are gonna listen to it, then I'm okay with it. I'm very concerned that Ms. Robinson is responsible for diversifying the spending across the entire system, and she's a manager. I'm very, very concerned about that.
There's no authority.
Our vision for the program, and I mean this as a board, and if I'm stop me when I'm lying to anybody, is that we should be able to walk into any building on this campus at any given time on a surprise inspection, pop quiz, whatever it is, not that we do that, but for example, into the music department, say, how do you make sure that when you gotta buy tubas or whatever it is, that you're taking the supply diversity program into consideration? Or the engineering school, or the business school, or whatever it is. And we're just not fully integrated there yet. And that is very, very frustrating. After all of these years, we are not, this isn't a part of our culture. And I can't understand, with all the problems we've had, with all the social unrest, with all of the awakening, with all of the getting slapped in the face, with not paying attention to social issues, we are still at a point where we can't even weave into the culture of LSU being fair in how we spend our money. So I don't know what it's gonna take, but I am encouraged by the fact that we have new people in charge. But I'm gonna say, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Chairman Starnes very much for adding an update to the agenda, because when this thing slips off the agenda, nothing happens. And so I would ask the chairman that we have a standing report at all of our meetings until we can satisfy ourselves that this is going to be a program that we can stop thinking about. I told your predecessor that. I said, I don't want to have to think about this. I want to forget it exists. It should be so automatic that I forget we even had it. So I would just ask, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to put this before us. I'm very disappointed with the update. This reads like a baby program, and it's been around for a number of years, and we really need to get our act together. Thank you.
Ms. Torres, Mr. Chairman, three years ago when he was chairman, that was one of his big pushes, and I think the word he was looking for is she needs authority if she's going to manage all these programs. But 3 years ago, we got involved with this. Tell me, what percentage were we spending 3 years ago, and what are we spending today? It's a performance-based question. And I think that's where Mr. Williams is at. Are we moving forward in the percentage of dollars spent at LSU from where we were 3 years ago?
And we are.
And by what percentage then?
I was asked to do this report on Tuesday, and it just, I did not have the time to pull
Then
all
I'll
those
apologize.
numbers
I
together.
apologize. Maybe you could get those numbers for us in the next meeting.
We will definitely have those numbers.
Because I think that's,
Because I think you have a really misconception of where this program is. We did lose ground for the past 3 years because we had a very ineffective director. I will tell you that I stepped in, I have brought someone to the table that will take this job very seriously and has already taken it very seriously. And diversity spend is incorporated into every contract that we let, every RFP that goes on the street, every invitation to negotiate. So we are in a much better place. We could be much further along. I absolutely agree with you. But we had a terribly ineffective director.
The prior two, because, and one thing
I
that.
don't know the one prior. I just know when I inherited this job a year ago,
Sure.
I realized real quickly that we had an issue.
And I think it does. And again, the board doesn't get down into the who's the director of what level. I think it's, we all want to see programs operate as they should. And it is unfortunate to hear that for 3 years we had a director. But again, you weren't in this role, Ms. Robinson wasn't in this role, and President Tate wasn't in the role. However, none of that changes the fact that we have to get it fixed right away. I wouldn't characterize it as losing ground in the past 3 years because, as Mr. Mallett pointed out, this program was just getting off the ground back then. So we have never gotten it where it needs to be. I think you and I agree on that. And I want to say again, You weren't there, Ms. Robinson, you weren't there, President Tate wasn't there, but none of that excuses the fact that we just have to get this right.
And maybe we can do on a monthly basis some statistics that they're referring to.
Absolutely.
So we can see those numbers specifically as a barometer of what progress is being made.
Without that, you don't.
Make you feel better, it make me feel better.
I would actually prefer to do it quarterly.
Okay.
Because I don't think that, it takes time to put these reports together. And quarterly would be more meaningful, more accurate numbers.
Okay, but we need a starting point, so the next meeting, we'll know where we start, right?
The next meeting is in December, and we should be able to provide last year and September 30th.
Okay, a starting point, and then every quarter, yeah.
I got a quick question. Excuse me. If, are you guys done? Yeah. Okay. If you go back a couple of slides, they had about 1,800, I can't remember which slide it was, but it said 1,800 and something businesses.
Yes, correct.
1843. That's suppliers that have tried to do business with us?
That have done business.
Have done
with
business.
LSU.
Now, the next slide, the next number, 1,600, 87% of them don't have the current certifications on file?
Correct.
What is that now? That amount of people can't do business because they don't have this paperwork in?
It's not that they can't do business, it's just that we don't, as part of the audit finding, they were concerned that how are we counting this towards diverse spend if we don't know that they are certified and current as of today. Some of the certifications are 10 years, some of them are 1 year, so there was no maintenance through the last round of leadership to make sure that we kept those certificates up and current, so that was our first task.
Well, because that's clearly, if you're sending out, and I'm just asking, if you send out 1,843 letters to bid on some work, and only 200 of them can do it.
No, they can.
Well, no, so
Okay.
the 1,800 is the number of suppliers that are registered to do business with the university. We may send solicitation to 5 or 10, and of that, there's a portion that actually respond to the solicitation.
Okay, of the 5 or 10, let's say you send 10, and 8 of them are in this 1608.
Yes.
What happens?
We would award to
Do they
them
get
based-
kicked out and can't do it?
No, we
Oh,
will
okay,
continue
okay.
to evaluate the bids.
I was like, well,
and
that,
then
you
if
never
there's
can
a-
get to the numbers James is talking about when you got
No.
87% of the people in the program
We
can't do
will
it.
ask for updated certification to confirm and make sure, as part of the contracting process, that they meet all of the requirements to be eligible as a diversifier.
Okay, that just concerned me when that many are
It
out
is
of
a
whack.
significant amount, and we do recognize that, it's been
Okay, all right.
neglected, so that is one of our priority tasks.
Okay, thank you.
One more, I got a question. What do we think is a good number at a minimum that we should, at LSU, should be trying to attain at the diversity level?
You mean as in percentage and spend or
I mean,
number
what
of
is our-
suppliers?
I mean, what is our, we spend a lot of money here. What kind of goal are we trying to attempt to where we had at least a minimum number or percentage was going to diversity programs, whether it be women, veterans, minorities, whatever it is? Well, surely we should set a goal, and then we try to attain the goal, but what's that number? And Ms. Torres, in your mind, what the amount of budget, you know the numbers better than anybody up here. What's a good percentage of this budget that we spend on contracts that you think would be a good goal for us to try to attain in the first year for diversity?
I'd like to see it 33%.
I like that number to start out with. That's a good number. It's a good goal. But that's why at the next meeting, we're going to find out where we're at.
Yes, we are.
And I have a feeling it's way lower than that.
I have a feeling it is too.
And Lee, I think that's an industry norm at 33%. I agree with Ms. Torres, but it also varies by business sector, whether it's construction, professional service, what have you.
Correct.
It floats a little bit, but in general, I think that's correct.
Can we, Mr. Chairman? And I do want to, I said it, but I don't want it to be lost. I think, Ms. Robinson, look, I'm excited about your leadership of this program. Ms. Torres gives you the highest endorsement, so that means you're ready to go and hit the ground running and do a great job for us. I'm concerned about her title. I'm concerned about her being a manager with such an enormous task for the entire system. And I'd like to know, and if we don't have the answer now, I would just want to know either what we want to do, what the university intends to do about that, and/or if we think nothing needs to be done about that, I certainly would like to hear the rationale for Ms. Robinson being able to get her job done at a manager level.
I just think she needs authority. I think his problem, the manager name doesn't seem to have much authority. When she goes into these different situations, she needs something that gives her authority to demand that it be done.
I mean, I'm sorry, we don't mean to laugh. Ms. Robinson carries a big stick.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And I hear what you're saying about title, but
That's just not the way it works at the university level, and that's a concern of mine. When we're sitting here saying that the person in charge of supply diversity for the whole system is a manager, and that doesn't seem to be a high enough level in the chain of command, and the response is laughter and, oh, you don't know Ms. Robinson, she's really gonna get it done, y'all. That's not gonna cut it, respectfully.
I think you ought to reevaluate.
We need a person. What I'm trying to point out is we can't run a program like this. This has been the program's problem. We can't run this program on, we see Ms. Robinson's real good at getting it done even though doesn't have the right title. We need to do it right. And to me, hold on, Mr. Mallett, to me, it's either tell me why a manager, even one as talented as Ms. Robinson, either tell me why a manager level, because these are hierarchy titles in the chain of command in the university structure. President, executive vice president, manager has a certain meaning in the chain of command in the university system. And where she is as a manager doesn't seem consistent with someone who has to ensure that there's supply diversity of the whole system. So, and I don't think it's okay to say, but Ms. Robinson's really good at getting it done. Either tell me why a manager can do it, or what the plan would be to elevate that position to the appropriate position in the system, or why it's sufficient as just a manager.
May I make a comment? May I make a comment?
May I say one thing?
Go ahead.
Why don't you let her come to the next meeting and address that? Give her some time to digest everything you said, and because I know you'll do a good job, and give her a lot.
That's perfectly reasonable.
And I think it's only fair that we allow you to come to the next meeting, and you figure out, you hear what we're asking, and I think you'll figure it out. And I think my astute fellow is right on target. He's very emotional today.
I'm just passionate.
Okay, he's passionate. He's passionate. But I think you hear what we need, and I agree. I don't disagree with him. I just think, in fairness to you, and the nice lady who's going to take over, that you come with an answer to the question. I think you're capable. Go ahead.
James is obviously very, very passionate about this, and understandably so. The reality of it is we've had some other folk who were not probably passionate in their responsibility and their role to perform, and so it appears that we have a new revised group, a couple of folk who want to see this happen, and I'm sure that they can clearly see your passion, James, which flows into the body of this group of individuals up here. So maybe we ought to give an opportunity for Ms. Torres and Ms. Robinson. Maybe we ought to give them an opportunity to put some benchmarks in place and identify some things where we can get things accomplished that will help move this effort forward. There's definitely going to have to be some things put in place to help advance the culture of individuals who make decisions about inclusivity and what have you. And so Ms. Torres's plate is more than full already. And so we probably need to seriously give them some time to identify some things. And maybe the chair can also put a small committee together to help push this piece forward. Now,
We already have a diverse committee, Mr. Chair.
Say it again? Say it again? You have what?
We have a diversity committee, I thought.
Let me recognize
So anyway, I'm just-
President Tate, please.
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody's passion on the topic. This is a strategy issue. You know, what's really manifesting itself here, and I would hope to take it to another level, is a lack of a clear strategic plan. If we had a real strategic plan, we would not be having this conversation. We shouldn't be talking about people's credentials, who can do this or that. It would be operationalized in terms of the strategic plan. If we take the topic of diversity more broadly defined, not just supplier, but all the way down to who we actually have in our research studies, and do they generalizably apply to the society here in Louisiana, all the way to the diversity of our suppliers, there should be a plan related to it, and we should be implementing that plan across the totality of this enterprise. So what has been identified in this conversation is just a real lack of a plan. We could pin it on individuals. The last person couldn't do this or that. Ultimately, I've never seen a plan related to this that's attempted to be implemented. I mean, all of this is just rhetorical positions about we want to see something good. You hear a number now, 33%. Whatever the number is, there needs to be an operationalized plan, a set of people charged to implement that plan, and those people held account. That would be my preference for operationalizing anything we do. The chairman has put together a committee related to diversity and inclusion, where I think this would be a big part of how we think about one of many things that we might actually want to be engaged in with respect to this topic. And then we need to have a laid out plan, again, with people held accountable, where there could be presentations on this front. And I'm very comfortable working with Ms. Torres and others to make sure this happens in this area, but it has to happen across the totality of this enterprise. Every single area is at risk if we don't have a real plan and can operationalize it and then have conversations about it. So I understand the frustration that people are having today, and we'll respond accordingly. I do believe this should be part of a planning function with the chancellors and the like, so that there's buy-in, and then how we operationalize it, you all can take a look at it. This is a business matter, fully. And so I think we ought to handle it that way, and happy to, of course, because it's my job, take the lead on it. So I greatly appreciate the conversation and the passion related to this topic, and I hope it's applied more broadly to matters of diversity, as that committee is charged to do that. And to be frank, and I'll just say it to you all, our current design related to leadership more broadly in this area, these topics are not something that our current design would allow us to actually operationalize. So get ready. It's got to be real. Yeah. I'm just telling you, this can't happen, the kinds of things you all are talking about, the way we're designed. In order.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. I think he's sort of wrapped up this, and we got work to do, and staff has. So if we could, any other comments? We could,
I just want to tell Ms. Torres, thank you. Ms. Torres, thank you. I know that you try hard, and we do appreciate you, and I want you to know that.
I have to add one thing. When she doesn't try hard, she does a hell of a job.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I want to be really clear about it.
Try hard.
We've asked her to do some things on an interim basis, and it is not like somebody's just coming in holding things together. She's excelling at what she's doing, and I really want to commend you for it and appreciate everything you do.
Okay. With that, could we have a motion to
I move.
the finance?
Second.
We got one, Mr. Zuslag, and Ms. Blossom, is that it? You were seconded? Okay, if there are no objections, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, would you convene,
Thank you for bringing that up, too. That's important to put that on the agenda.
thank you. Would you convene the Property and Facilities Committee?
Yes, thank you, I appreciate it. Ms. Torres, would you call the roll for the property? I'm going to fill in. I'm sorry, Ms. Griffin, I'm sorry, I had Ms. Torres fill in for Mr. Woods. Thank you. Ms. Griffin.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Damp?
Here.
Mr. Mallett?
Here.
Mrs. Ushla?
Here.
Mr. Woods?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, there's a quorum.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Torres, would you again bring us next order of business, please? Thank you.
Thank you. The first item is a request from the LSU Health Science Center to approve execution of an amendment to the master hospital lease to remove the orange and brown parking areas from the master hospital lease. The Health Science Center in New Orleans is in support of its mission, wishes to amend the existing master hospital lease with UMCMC to remove the orange and brown parking areas from the lease. UMCMC has completed construction of a new parking garage, thus no longer requires the leased parking space, therefore in agreement with this amendment. The Health Science Center New Orleans will use those parking lots to provide parking for, among other things, new housing that is being constructed for students and others with relationships to the Health Science Center in New Orleans. The fiscal impact, there is no rental increase was applied when the orange and brown lots were added, so the rent will not be reduced. The documents have been reviewed by Office of General Counsel. Parties of interest are the Board of Supervisors, the Health Science Center New Orleans, University Medical Center Management Corporation, and the state of Louisiana through the Division of Administration. There is a related transaction by separate agreement, a second addendum to the MOU between the LSU Healthcare Services Division and LSU Health Science Center New Orleans, dated January 11, 2016, will be executed to transfer the brown and orange lot from HCSD to the Health Science Center in New Orleans. And we ask your authorization.
Thank you, Ms. Torres, and welcome Dr. Nelson to your meeting today. So if there are any questions about this item of business?
So moved.
Move from Mr. Mallett, I believe. Second? Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Zuslak, okay. Would you call roll, please, Ms. Torres?
Mr. Woods?
Abstain.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Damp?
Yes.
Mr. Mallett?
Yes.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Ushla?
Yes.
5 yeas, unopposed.
Okay, well, that motion is approved. Would you present the next item of business, Ms. Torres?
Yes, I will. The next item is a request from LSU A&M to amend the 22-23 5-year capital outlay budget request and first-year prioritized list for Louisiana State University. At the September meeting, the Board of Supervisors approved the fiscal year 22-23 capital outlay budget request for LSU. LSU A&M requests the Military and Security Science Building Project be included in the FY 22-23 capital outlay budget request. State funds will be requested to cover the appropriate total project cost of approximately $61 million. And we ask your approval to add this to the capital outlay request.
Okay, any questions, please? this is just an adjustment to the capital outlay, which will be presented to the regents shortly, Board of Regents. Yes, through the process. If there are no questions, we have a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Morrow, Mr. Woods, seconded. Would you read the roll, please?
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Damp?
Yes.
Mr. Mallett?
Yes.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Zuschlag?
Yes.
6 yeas, none opposed.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. With that, would you present the next item, Ms. Torres?
I am going to defer the next item to my friend and colleague, General Counsel DeCuir.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Board members, the next item is the presentation on our Utilities Modernization Initiative. You each should have a PowerPoint that looks like this. It will probably be easier to flip through it on paper, but you can also follow it on the screen. At the outset, we've talked about this project almost monthly for almost a year, and the last time we spoke, we indicated we would have the details pinned down by October, and here we are, and we have them pinned down. Before I start, we have representatives from InWave and Bernhard here. Would they stand and just wave? And upon your approval, this will effectively be our team. Thank you, guys. We have our legal teams here, Dennis Blunt and his firm. JP Morrell was here for InWave. Would you guys stand? And our consultants in the back. These guys worked really hard on this. And so if you flip to the first page, thank you, guys. The way this project works, and this is important because this is a classic public-private partnership, lots of projects within LSU's system and going forward will be done this way. We have one cooperative endeavor, and it's an agreement between LSU Centrio. Centrio is the successor to InWave, TEP, which is Bernhard, and UMLLC, which is a single-purpose entity created by our real estate foundation to engage in this project. They basically execute an umbrella agreement, which is the cooperative endeavor, outline the roles and responsibilities of each party. Underneath that, LSU will execute a prime lease to UMLLC. That prime lease will be a lease of our utilities infrastructure assets. UMLLC will execute an almost identical sublease and concession agreement to Centrio. Centrio will then operate and upgrade the facilities, and they will then execute a construction contract with the other teammate, TEP, which will perform the $111 million of improvements to enhance our facilities. If you flip to the next slide, what this is this basically is a graph of each team member's responsibilities within this project. Centrio will finance and operate the improved facilities. TEP will perform the design and construction work on the improved facilities. On the right side of this sheet, we have an option to engage them for future capital projects, but that's purely discretionary. What's important is the last line across the bottom. This does not include in-building mechanical systems. This project never included in-building mechanical systems. However, one of the things we originally agreed to, if you look at the third box on the bottom row, TEP has the first option if we want to include in-building mechanical systems to make us a proposal. That's simply discretionary. This is really for the Highland and the main utility plant behind the stadium. So if you flip to the next page, what made this agreement effective and complicated are a set of key performance indicators or key performance indicators and standards. Basically, there are targets related to runtime, unplanned outages, unplanned outages in cogeneration, volume of hot water, efficiency rates, and electricity output. The operator has to meet certain targets within certain thresholds, or there's actually penalties that have to be paid under the concession agreement. At the bottom, there's a different set of performance standards. The performance standards apply to things like the design of the facilities, environmental concerns, health and safety concerns, even down to vehicle use and data network requirements. So we're going to pay a given fee, and on the back end, the operator has to hit very specific targets. Otherwise, we would be entitled to penalties or rebates as a concession. And that took a lot of time to plan out. That was a lot of the negotiation process. This page is where the rubber meets the road. This is really the financial breakdown over the 30 years of this deal, from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2051. If you look at the first column, fiscal year 2021, the very top number is the capped O&M cost. The very bottom number, savings relative to budget, is our savings as compared to what we've budgeted on our total utility spend for that year. The first 2 years, the savings are $4.9 and $4.4 million. That's a bit of an aberration. It's an accurate number, but aberration in that we don't pay for the capital cost of the improvements until they come online. They're anticipated to come online, pending approval today, approximately the end of 2023, and those payments would start in 2024. If you look at the savings number for 2024, that's the 1.3 million. That's the savings we were expecting, and that savings number then grows over the life of the agreement for the next 30 years. Once the improvements come online, we benefit from efficiencies and improvements in our system, and those improvements then grow over time. I didn't want anybody to see those first couple numbers and wonder why it dropped. That's before the capitalized cost of the equipment get added into the equation. If you flip to the last page, and this is where having your pages are going to go back and forth. This outlines how the money flows in this agreement. If you start at the bottom where it says LSU UM LLC, you're going to see 4 boxes to the left. Capped operation and maintenance costs, an initial capital charge, uncapped operation and maintenance costs, and future capital projects. Those are the boxes that create what will be our annual utilities fee. If you go back to the prior page, those boxes combined would be that yellow bar that says total LSU obligation. The total LSU obligation corresponds on the next page to those first 4 boxes, and I'm sorry, plus the commodities fee on the right. So everything beneath the purple line is what constitutes LSU's total obligation. We pay the 4 boxes to Centrio. We're going to buy our commodities the same way we buy our commodities, natural gas, electricity. We pay the first 4 boxes to Centrio. Centrio then pays TEP for the construction of improvements. It takes the operations and management fee to pay itself, and it also pays back its lenders for the capital it borrows to improve our system. And that is basically how this entire operation works. What we're effectively doing is we're using our operating budget to redesign and improve 2 physical plants, including our electrical generation capacity. The last page, it's interesting following the prior discussion, is in the request for proposals, in the proposals themselves, and in the evaluation, there were DBE requirements all through. We accepted the entity's plans, and they've hired a firm named DMM, which does this in New Orleans, to basically be their DBE consultant and report to us quarterly on the DBEs they use, the amount of money spent, and the services provided. And if we have a problem with it, quarterly, we'll be able to raise that issue with them. It was modeled on the DBE program in the Charity Hospital lease. So this is the project. The project is really best explained by the flow of funds slide and the large spreadsheet on the dollars. We've done a lot of work on this. I feel this is a good deal for the school. The other thing, in addition to money, is we will be removing the maintenance and operation of our 2 largest chilled water plants and our electrical generation capacity. Basically, we'll be taking that out of facilities and privatizing it. Our facilities people will have some benefit in not having to worry about day-to-day breakages, runtime problems, keeping it going, upgrades, upgrading software. We're basically hiring a firm to do this for us. It's very analogous to what we do at food service. We don't cook our own food anymore. We hire a company to cook food for us. Any questions on it? We have
Let me,
over here.
before we take questions, let me just make a few comments. Thank you, Mr. Takur, on going over the outline, but I want to thank you for keeping us on track and working with, we had a working group, which is still in play, that's been working together for over 9 months, I believe is right, and it meeting 8:30, 8 o'clock Monday morning for an hour every week, and then many weeks working other times and weekends. So Ms. Torres chaired that committee, and it was a very complex, complicated process it went through. We had, of course, Rob Stewart was on representing REF every session, and we appreciate their cooperation in being handling the leases on this, making it possible to proceed this way. Tony Lombardo and Patrick Martin with our facilities work closely with the 2 providers in working out the agreements and working the engineering solutions so that we could get what we need here. And the thing that's missing in this chart is there are savings projected just on operations, primarily because of operations, but we're also getting new equipment, upgraded equipment. So this doesn't show what the potential cost for maintaining the older equipment that we have now is going forward. So we'll basically be upgrading everything, much new equipment, more efficient. So there's a lot of wins in this for LSU. And then also we had KPMG intimately involved, leading us through this. Ian Tester is here, and David Bessler were our representatives, and then of course our outside counsel with Dennis Blunt. And so I want to thank not only the team and Ms. Torres for all the hard work put into this, and it's not over yet. I still have to complete the deal, go to the market for acquiring the funding, and finalizing the design, ordering equipment, and so forth. So, but we're at the point where, with this board's approval, we'll finalize the agreements. I'd just like to thank the 2 parties for working with us for a year and a half or so to provide the implementation of this, and Centrio and DEP. So I hope I hadn't missed anybody, because it's been a real big effort. And I've enjoyed representing the board on it and I appreciate the way the team has made information available to me and treated me like a team player. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Did Winston say?
I'll wait. I'll just say we have a couple of steps after this I need to explain.
You'll tell them. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Dan.
I want to add a couple of comments to that, because cannot tell you ladies and gentlemen, how hard Mr. DeQuire worked on this, and Ms. Torres, and Tony Lombardo and his team. You know, this was a big part of my life last year, and to me, the way the board's supposed to work, this was a great example, because we had a board member, and I really want to salute my good friend Wayne Brown, a board member who was absolutely embedded in this process, and we all know and obviously have a great deal of respect for Mr. Brown and his level of expertise. And it makes it easier for us as a board when you have somebody that is really embedded in this kind of process. And what a great job, again, Tony and Donna, Winston, and Mr. Brown. I mean, it's the way, to me, it's supposed to work. So I just want to publicly thank Mr. Brown for his great work.
I have to apologize for always asking the weird questions, but I just do it, you know. So, will there be many people displaced in the work area? I mean, the people down in the weeds that really get the work done, do we displace people?
There's a labor services agreement. I don't know if Doug wants to talk to it, but effectively, like when we privatize other entities, the employees will be given options to stay on or join the contractor.
And Mr. Temple, Tony Lombardo and I met about it today.
Okay.
So it is something, I believe there are about 10, if I recall, employees that probably 4 or 5 of them are retirement eligible, and then the rest of them we'll work with to see what's best for them.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a good thing. As long as we're not, hopefully not displacing folk who have a skill set and who've been committed to LSU for a long time, carrying the ball in this area. You know, I just hope that we can fully consider those guys and their commitment to LSU over the years.
Thank you. Mr. Temple, any other questions? Just
Winston, I only have one question, and I appreciate all the work y'all done, and I think it's a good deal, but explain to me, UMLLC, who's that?
That is a single-purpose entity created by the Real Estate Foundation within our LSU Foundation.
So we're going to send the money to them?
Yes.
Are they making any money?
They asked for a it was a $7,500 annual payment for the purposes of creating the entity and then completing that entity's annual filings. It's an LLC to stay valid with the Secretary of State.
It's just a movement of money.
And the annual audit.
And the annual audit. Yeah, they have to do an annual audit. Unlike our real estate deals, UMLLC, or our foundation, isn't borrowing any money on this. It's really holding the leasehold interest and then subleasing the leasehold interest to our vendor, Centrio. Centrio's actually borrowing the money on its own line. And so it's really just a leaseholder.
okay. Other questions? Did you want to talk about the next 2 steps?
Yeah. Just briefly, upon board approval, if the board approves, we then submit this to the Division of Administration for review. The Division of Administration has done a similar project to this with the Shaw Center downtown, so they're expecting it. Then it goes, because it's a cooperative endeavor worth more than $1 million, then it goes to the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget. Upon approval there, it then goes to the Bond Commission. The board approval is the first step, but there are 3 more steps before we can close, and we're hoping to have those done by January.
Close in January and hope to start construction. Any other questions then? Comments, questions?
So moved.
Well, if so, could we have a motion to?
So moved. So moved.
Mr. Mallett, second? Have a second? Yes, sir, Mr. Pat, thank you. Now with that, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Woods?
Abstain.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Aronson? Mr. Damp?
Yes.
Mr. Mallett?
Yes.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Zuschlag?
Yes.
5 yeas, none opposed.
Okay, good, thank you. Motion passed. I think that's the last item on our business.
One more?
Correct, so we take a vote.
One more.
I'm sorry, there's another one?
Yeah.
Well, we had the bond issue. Is there another one, Ms. Torres? I thought
No, that's it.
Okay.
they took it out of order.
We did them out of order.
So we accept entertain a motion to. So moved. Adjourn, thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stamp, and the second was by, Zuschlag. Okay, with that, with no objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr.
so much.
Brown. Supervisor Temple, would you convene the Athletics Committee?
Yes, sir. Ms. Griffin, may we have the roll call?
Mr. Temple?
Yes, here.
Mr. Blossman?
Here.
Mr. Armenter?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Damp?
Here.
Ms. Jones? Here. Mr. Morrow? Ms. Werner? Here. Mr. Williams? Mr. Chairman, there's a quorum for the
Mr.
Thank you.
Morrow is here. Sorry.
Yeah. Ms. Ralph, present the athletics items for today, please.
Okay, we would first like to request the approval of the contract for our head national championship track and field coach, Dennis Shaver.
I'll make a motion that we accept.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
Mr. Temple?
Yes.
Mr. Blossman?
Yes.
Mr. Armenter?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Damp?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Ms. Werner? Yes. Mr. Williams? We have 8 yeas, none opposed.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, it's acclamation. Ms. Stephanie, we have 2 items that we're going to cover, and the floor is yours.
Asking to put both of these together?
Sure.
Okay, so that we are asking for approval for the employment agreement and the termination agreement of Coach Ed Ogeron.
Are there any questions regarding either of these items?
I got one little quick question.
Sure.
I think you guys did a wonderful job, by the way, on the whole scenario with the coach and how we're moving forward. But I have one easy question about when Miles left, when he got hired by Kansas, there was something in his contract, or we negotiated that he would come off of what we owed him, and that wasn't the case in Coach O's contract, right?
That is not the case in terms of mitigation, but on the front end of negotiating the contract, we worked through it that it would be 70% of his remaining amount on his contract, and that's what the amount is that is owed.
Okay. Okay, that's negotiated on the front end instead of the end. So, all right, that's my only question. Thank you.
Any other questions? None. May I get a motion?
So moved to
Yep.
accept.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Armature and seconded by my good friend. All those, get a roll call, please.
Mr. Temple?
Yes.
Mr. Blossman?
Yes.
Mr. Armenter?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Damp?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Ms. Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
9 yeas, none opposed.
All right, it's been approved unanimously. Any other questions or comments regarding any issues? If none, that concludes our athletic interest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Supervisor Temple. That concludes today's business. We will reconvene the board meeting tomorrow morning. Without objection, we are at recess.